Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through. It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You fought bravely. Captain John, I do not know what strength is in my heart. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people failed. Our people.
Our people. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
All right, people, welcome to The Narrative, episode 9. Almost hit double digits here, so that should be pretty fun. Should be a good one. I want to apologize to everybody about having Zach on last week. He's a bit of a conspiracy theorist. I was trying to, he's kind of like the old lion of Badlands. I was trying to give him, introduce him to people who might not know him, and he started spouting off all these conspiracy theories and stuff. So we're probably not going to have him back around, but, if he suffered through that one, thank you. Tonight, we're going in a completely different direction. We're going to have somebody who does not talk about conspiracy theories. He doesn't, especially baseless ones, which Zach named a show after. So, Zach's kind of just telling you what he's all about. My guest tonight is all facts, all logic, often cited by the mainstream media, quite often cited by the Trump administration. I think he's a fan of Our Boy Blue, like I am. So should be a good one. Tonight we're going to figure it all out. We do this every week. We figure everything out every single week. We have set out a template. My guest and I tonight also got on a little pre-show, which is rare for me. He was like, we need to plan a few things out. Little does he know, the rubric is something I can look at while completely derailing us onto rabbit trails and side topics. But this is the narrative, the show where we talk about stories, because as I always say, we are in a war of them. We're in a war of stories. We're in a war for stories, both for and against your mind and the collective mind. So we are going to talk about some well-known theories, but through the lens of narrative warfare. Before I bring my guest on, I am going to thank tonight's sponsor, which I believe sponsored us last week. This is Dr. Northrup and her product, Amatalife.
In 2013, I was one of the Reader's Digest 100 Most Trusted People in America, and now I am one of the 12 Disinformation Dozen. I am Dr. Christiane Northrup, and I came up with this supplement, Praeria Mirifica Plus. Why? For those of you having perimenopausal symptoms, that would be hot flashes, mood swings, inability to sleep, this kind of thing, we find that this Praeria Mirifica Plus with the Thai herb Praeria mirifica, which has the world's strongest phytoestrogen, not the same as mammalian estrogen, this really helps a lot of women. It's one capsule, one in the morning, one at night. And if you're having hot flashes, mood swings, inability to sleep, dry eyes, give it a try. Praeria Mirifica Plus.
Order your 30-day supply of Amatalife today by calling the number on your screen. Not available in stores. Call now.
All right, much appreciated to Dr. Northrup. I've been told directly that she is a big fan of what we do here, particular fan of the narrative. Who can blame her? I believe Story Hour as well. I have not sampled that product. I'm not going to lie to you people, but I'm always a fan of people who get on and talk about what they're making, what they're selling, and can actually answer questions about it and go back and forth. So support our sponsors. They support us. And the other sponsor tonight, this asset's been having a good week. A lot of assets have been having a good start to the golden age, if you're not Canadian. And that would be our friends at Goldco. The last 4 years have put so much stress on American family finances. Help end the stress now and celebrate the golden age with President Trump by diversifying with gold and silver. Remember President Trump's first term? Gold increased by 55%. Don't wait. Diversify your hard-earned assets. Buy your gold from Goldco, now with no purchase minimums. Goldco has been established as a top-rated precious metals company and a leader in the gold industry, providing white glove treatment for over 10 years. Their buyback guarantee assures you that if your situation changes, they'll repurchase your metals at the best price, providing you with peace of mind. You may even qualify for up to 10% back and bonus silver. Visit badlandsgold.com, claim your free information, and instantsilver.com/badlands to see how much free silver you could get. Find out the relationship between gold, silver, Trump, and you with the free report focused on Trump and your financial future. That's badlandsgold.com and instantsilver.com/badlands. Take control of your financial destiny. So much appreciated to Goldco, to Amatalife. And without further ado, I will bring on tonight's guest. You probably were just watching him, Stormy Patriot Joe. How's it going, Stormy?
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm good. So, I you saw my intro. I'm trying to get away from conspiracy territory. Yeah. All we talk about is completely fake narratives, completely unprovable things, stories only. So no, you should fit in well here. We're going to end up looking at Q drops tonight. It makes sense. You're the Q guy of Badlands, you and Abs. I'm a Q guy. That's kind of how I got into this stuff. So we'll talk about some of that later. But I was interested in having you on here. And besides the fact that we're going to have a different dynamic than you and Abs have, maybe see if I can hit you with some different stuff for Q. And it's not about like, hey, let's prove this or debunk that. More macro. Clearly, we've passed some sort of inflection point. We all seem to agree with that. What inflection point it was, maybe the mileage varies there, but certainly people who were following Q from 2017 or anywhere in between, it's probably been a pretty good time period for them. But yeah, before we get into the actual analysis or some of the questions I want to hit tonight, just Q or besides, how are you feeling month 1, week 1 and 2 of Trump 2.0?
Well, before I get into that, I was going to ask you how you're feeling, because I know you're a new pop, and you probably get all the, prior to the birth, all these expectations, and you probably read some books or read some things, and it's never what you expect. You have to just live it. And I'd love to hear like your favorite moment so far, and something that you were unexpected, like, holy crap, this is for real.
Man, yeah, it's been a journey. If you guys hear Baby Bright crying, it is entirely Mrs. Bright's fault. Happens sometimes. No, yeah, it's been pretty crazy. First of all, I think it was pretty cool to us that he was born on the 1st. Didn't know that was going to happen. And for people in this world, I feel like whether you're like a Q person or just an InfoWar Trump person, MAGA, like you're looking at Golden Age stuff. Like, we were talking about the Golden Age way before Trump branded it something, and to have him born on the first day of what we could look back on as a Golden Age, I hope is an auspicious sign. But yeah, I didn't read the books and stuff, man. I think
it was semi-sarcastic.
Yeah, I think if I did something right, I think my fighting little stint taught me that there is such a thing as over-preparing. I think you need to prep somewhat. I think you need to prep your mindset for things. But if you try to overplan, then you get hit in the mouth, as Tyson would say. Everything goes out the window. I mean, everybody knows that sleep deprivation is real. Mrs. Bright is dealing with more of that than I am. The last couple weeks, I've been...
You look like you're sleeping like a baby, dude.
Today, I managed to sleep. But yeah, I got back into working this last couple of weeks, and that's tough. I think that's the toughest thing, is like, when do the handoffs occur between mom and dad, and how long do the handoffs take? And I mean, hiccups. I didn't think I'd be so stressed out about a baby hiccuping, but trying to figure out how to get him to stop doing that, and the little things.
Awesome, man. Well, God bless. It's a fantastic moment of my life. Happy father of 2 now grown men in my life, and
So you did something right, I guess.
Yeah. That is my testimony so far. It's got 2 boys in their 20s that are doing good things.
And how do they deal with their hiccups? Are they still dealing with that, or?
No, that went by pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, the things you, like Mrs. Bright, obviously, like any mom, worries about these things that are probably nothing, right? It's like people then have a second one, they're like, yeah, you're not going to worry about any of that stuff. Never thought we would be so hyper-focused on the consistency of droppings, as if we're tracking game out in the wild, but paying attention to stuff like that and, all the fun stuff. But I know everybody says it flies by, so we're trying to... When I'm up with him after the show, I'm going to grab him. I'm usually up with him until 3 a.m. And I think I'm really trying to remember those moments, because I know they're going to go by fast.
You're like, do I get a humidifier? Do I get a dehumidifier? Do I change the vents? What do I do?
Yeah, we have 2 humidifiers. It's funny you say that, because, these Amazon packages just keep showing up at the house, and Mrs. Bright just tries to like squirrel them away and set stuff up before I catch her. So we're creating some sort of rainforest situation where he was snorting too much. So now we've got humidifiers all around the house, just blasting, like as if it's a zoo enclosure. He's like a sugar glider or something.
Put a little Vicks around it. You guys got a whole like spa feeling there.
Yeah. I see the chat, and there's of course, there's always 2 people that think I'm disrespecting Zach and hate Zach. Obviously, I was joking, guys. We had a good episode last week. And yeah, so back to you. The reason I wanted to have you on, I mean, I think this is good timing. It's good timing for so many different types of info warrior. But all the focus is on Trump right now, like worldwide. It's back on Trump like it's really never been, even in his first term. But man, for people who were around in the early days of Q, maybe there's some people that fell out of it for a while and are probably coming back around. I bet you've been getting anecdotes about that. But I guess I'm just, before we even get into the Q stuff, how are you feeling about the advent of Trump 2.0 compared to what you thought was going to be going on? Like, is it matching up with what you thought was going to be going on? Is it crazier? Is it less crazy?
Depends like when you ask the question. So back in 2018, did I think that we were going to have this pause period? No, I didn't really expect that. But then in 2019, when the first time I saw Biden come out on the stage and get the Democrat nominee, I'm old enough to remember Senator Biden pretty damn well. And I took one look at that guy and I said, that ain't the same Senator Biden. So I looked at that situation and I said, Bernie and Pocahontas and everybody drops right out, and they cleared a path for a guy that was like a 1%er, and he gets the Democrat nominee. And then Trump is continuing to troll on it, saying he doesn't look like the same Joe. He doesn't talk like the same Joe. He's shot. Joe is shot. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I said to my internal groups at the time, I said, don't be surprised if we paved the way and there's an awakening period where Q wrote, sometimes you have to show versus tell. Right. And so I was prepared for 2020. I didn't have a down period. I really haven't had a down period in these 8 years or so. So I didn't expect it before I saw Biden. When I saw Biden, then I said, this is a possibility. One of those things that I'll say on the show is, here's a few different paths that may or may not happen, but there is a path that we're going to install this guy, and it's for this reason. It's to wake people up, and we're going to have, we're going to have some periods of time that don't really make sense. And I haven't moved off that position. And I think it only got stronger and stronger from every fall he had, for every gaffe he had, for every policy he did, for all these pictures at the border. Every single day he's been the greatest red pill moment of my life. Okay. Yeah. So, did all that just happen by accident? Would you install as a deep state plan to put him into place to be that kind of guy? Not my opinion, no.
Yeah, that's one of my main things. It's kind of funny because some people, I'm the story guy, right? The narrative guy. Chris talks about narrative all the time. A lot of people talk about it these days, but a few years ago, it wasn't that popular to talk about narrative warfare. I think we talk about psychological warfare, and narrative warfare is obviously a part, it's an aspect of psychological warfare. You're changing people's minds, hearts and minds. Goes back forever. The Q drops didn't create psyops or narrative warfare, but I think Chris has been writing about this for a long time. I really think your point about Biden, it makes me think of the reason I really mapped onto the idea of Patriot control, and I'd been following the Q drops and everything, but strangely it was less events mapping onto them that really were convincers for me. For some reason, that's not really how I work. Like my mind works. I think that they're important. I think that early on they were like these markers, like, hey, pay attention to this thing. There's these coincidences that keep mapping. But I didn't start having real confidence that what I was seeing was a real operation until the story started getting so absurd that, similar to what you said with Joe, I mean, I affectionately nicknamed him Our Boy Blue a couple of years ago. Right. And, that was meant to be a few different ways. Whether you think that's the real Joe Biden or not, it doesn't matter to me. It's one of the things that I know Chris says a lot as well.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. And people can, that might be kind of an interesting thing to touch on is, again, Chris talks about this a lot, but I think more people are starting to understand that it's not supposed to be this cute saying when I say the war is a story, the story is a war. If the narrative moves the collective mind in the direction that the storytellers want it to go in, then it doesn't matter, literally, whether or not that is Joe Biden or whether or not it's Jim Carrey playing Joe Biden, right? Like the ghost of Joe Biden. Our Boy Blue is what he signified to both MAGA and to people who voted for him. To them, it was like this horror show. And to a lot of people in our movement, it was almost a comedy show. And to me, those were some of those macro signs of control of like, I don't know how intricate each little piece of the story was planned out, but the overarching theme, you can't convince me that a story wasn't written that included Trump, then Biden, then Trump again. That seems to be what we've seen playing out here.
Yeah, and we'll hit a little bit on that when we pull up some of the things. The one that says sometimes the past finds the future connects all of that. And it was mind blowing. We had Alpha Warrior on our show the other day, and he saw me do that post, and he said it was the post that made him officially jump in and say Q is legit, a military operation, and your post was this the significant post to make me do it. So I figured that'd be a good one to pull over, and we'll walk through that at some point. But it really connects the pre-Biden era to the new Trump era is what it connects.
Yeah, we're gonna go through. Stormy sent over kind of a little slideshow, and I'm not as tech savvy as Abs, but we're gonna meander our way through it. But that's a good point actually when you bring up about Alpha, and whether you're talking about the Q drops, the awakening in general. Honestly, even on like a more normie layer, people originally getting into Trumpism. I mean, I always talk about I'm a former Democrat. I'm an Obama voter who ended up finding my way over to Trump.
That's quite a distance.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's kind of funny because one of the things I've realized is that everyone has such a different, we might have similar paths to awakening, but there's always that one thing that like everyone can remember. And it's so funny because for some people, it can seem like this seismic event that finally convinced them to look at things differently. But then your seismic event might be somebody else's like, yeah, that was just a random passing curiosity. And I'm wondering with you, I don't even remember if we've talked about, I'm sure you've talked about it on your show, but when did you find the drops? And do you remember the moment or the why of when you were like, this is real, this isn't somebody LARPing, this isn't some bullshit?
Yeah, we did talk about it, you and I, when we were traveling around in South Dakota. So real quick on my story was I was always a conservative. I would call myself like a Reagan conservative. But I wasn't awake. I was busy corporate America life. I was working, all these crazy hours and just kind of had my head down and just doing my deal. But then the Vegas shooting happened. And that was on October 1st, 2017. And I just didn't buy any of it. The positioning, the angles, it just didn't make logical sense to me. And we weren't getting any information. And Vegas has the most cameras of any place on earth. And plus you're shooting down to 20,000 people, everybody with a cell phone. Why aren't things popping up everywhere, kind of explaining, everything like that. So right. I just went nose diving into alternate media. I went into Reddit, I went to the Chans, I went into YouTube, wherever I could find somebody telling something different than what the mainstream news was telling. And then Q started posting October 28th, 2017. And I
always
like,
forget the timing there. So the Vegas shooting was before the drops.
Yep. And then quickly into the drops, Q starts talking about the Vegas shooting. And I was like, bam, this is for real. This is legit, And then how you and I talked about it was very early in those drops, it starts talking about Saudi Arabia and then what kind of unfolds from there as well. And what we can pull up that Do It Q slide that I sent over because it connects some of what we're talking about. So I didn't have a social media presence. I never in my life thought I'd be doing podcasts and things like that.
None of us did. I don't think. Maybe CanCon, but he's kind of a loser.
I personally built my Twitter account just days after Q started. So Q started like October 28th. I built my Twitter account like November 1st. And my only thing was to track what Dan and Trump and Q were doing, and I needed those accounts to do so. And I never even intended to make posts. I just was like, I got to be able to track stuff. That was my intention. And this Q proof happened on November 8th, 2017. And this is, I just screenshotted it just before the show. Donald Trump, now that he has his Twitter back up, you can go and do this yourself now. And that's what the cool thing is about having Trump back in the game here on Twitter is, but this post has several different Q connects, and congratulations to all the deplorables and the millions of people who gave a massive 304 to 227 electoral college landslide victory. Okay, and then he's got his team around him there. The first Q proof is actually down in the bottom, the timestamp. He pumps it out at 117 on the year is 17. So you got 217 staring you in the face. But the big one that people, you can do this. You have to do it on desktop. You can't do it on your phone. You have to do it on desktop. But if you open that tweet up and open that picture up and you right click and you go to save the file, we just screen capped it here. The upper right, the first few letters of it is Do It Q. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just show people. Anybody who's watching, I'm not savvy enough to show my desktop and don't want to screw anything up. But just for anybody to try this, because this is illuminating, and like Stormy said, now that Trump's account is back, you can just do this yourself, right? Like even when people are showing you stuff, like when you first brought this up, I was like, yeah, everybody knows that. But I think Stormy is right that this is one of those really powerful things to just do. So when you guys have time later, if you're rewatching this, whatever, go to Trump's account, find this tweet live on his account, November 8th, 2017, and then right click it. And you can even just open it in a new tab, and you're not going to see it on my screen, but at the top, it's going to say Do It Q in the file name. But what you really do, to Stormy's point, is you save it to your computer, you save it to your desktop, and when you look at that, the file name is going to save as Do It Q. So, and just for anybody who isn't aware of this, just like maybe not haven't worked online or worked with this kind of stuff, that is not a random file name, right? Normally you have a...
Look at the first comment. Look at the first comment there.
There you are. Do It Q. But, this isn't the type of thing that just happens randomly. The strings don't match. Obviously, it's astronomically impossible. So the significance of that is that, as simple as it sounds, what we have proof of, literal proof of, with that tweet is that somebody tweeted from Donald Trump's account and made sure that this picture of this Oval Office team was named with the file name Do It Q on the 17th in 2017, very shortly after the Q drops. For me personally, the people, this is where you can also get lessons, retroactive lessons of people that make mistakes trying to red pill people. The hand signs of the Q was super compelling to a lot of people and is not that compelling for me. Those are not really the kind of, now that you can reverse engineer it and say that the file name says Do It Q, then it's extra. It's like a little bit of seasoning on top, the way that they're positioned. But I remember at the time that people were talking about this, a lot of them were just pointing to the picture and being like, look at the Q, look at the air. Like, I've never really cared about air Qs, but when you've got a file name that's named Do It Q and Trump puts that out on the 17th, that is like bat signal, inarguable. He's either trying to direct people to the Q op, or at the very least, he's trolling, right? He's trolling somebody with it.
And I took something even bigger from it because I'm not tech savvy like to that level, but as far as I know, we can't create our own saved files. That had to go through Twitter on the back end. So that showed me just 11 days into the operation, I took like a big like mind blown that not only the connections here with the timestamp, the date, the file name, the thumbs, and we'll get into the picture from Saudi Arabia. But in my mind, at least, and maybe I'm wrong, but in my mind, I was like, they had to have back end Twitter help to do that.
I think you're right. Yeah,
and that made it even like kind of like raise that airplane up a little higher. That this is bigger than I expect, and I just keep pulling that airplane back and. It gets higher and higher every day, actually. But
an interesting guy is an interesting guy that I don't have a firm conclusive opinion on him, but I will say that I'm much more agnostic and maybe even leaning in a different direction than I used to. Is Jack Dorsey of Twitter? Very interesting guy. Very interesting digs that you can do on him. And I remember he was one of those names that in the early days of Trump and Q. I was like, oh, he's got these tweets talking about the satanic verses. He's one of them. Look, he's on Joe Rogan censoring everybody. But man, there's another way of looking at him. And I genuinely am of the opinion these days that his company was taken from him, co-opted, by the bad guys. And then this is what we talk about a lot of the times in the Q drops. They make so many references to strings being cut, and that's why, I think some people can be really reactive to some of these figures, and then they look like they're changing sides. But, there was a lot of hints in the drops that not everyone is as they appear, good or bad.
In the newspaper, I just flipped the image around so you could see what Trump has laid out there in front of himself. And I know this was a big moment for you when you and I talked about really what got you deep diving into it. So why don't you take your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, obviously you've got this Financial Times article, talking about Mohammed bin Salman. You've got him right there. Ghost ears are ringing if he's not watching this live. For me, the Saudi purge was the moment, and that was early on. I think that was like November 4th or something like that. 2017. It was a few days after the drops started, and the drops had said, Saudi Arabia first or SA first, right? You would know this better, but I kept that in mind. And then when that purge happened, I immediately knew, okay, not only does this mean that this info op is telling us something with insider information, but the implications of that were massive, right? Because it wasn't just, oh, these drops are giving us advanced intelligence. That would be big enough, right? But bad guys can give you advanced intelligence. All kinds of people can give you advanced intelligence. All that means is they're an insider. That doesn't mean there's a plan to save the world. But the implications being put forward in, you'll know the drop, the Durham boat drop, like one of the all-timers at the very beginning, right? I don't know if it was day one, but it was week one, where it really kind of just lays out, this is the plan. To me, that one struck a lot of people early on. It didn't strike me until the Saudi purge, because then I reverse engineer a lot. That's kind of how my mind works. So I like reverse indicators or negative indicators. And I was able to kind of map that and go back and go, okay, well, if any of this had any standing, and you're talking about a global or worldwide awakening, you need to get rid of the Saudi kingdom. And ironically, being a liberal, being an Obama voting, 2008, not 2012, liberal who never went conservative, never voted Republican or anything like that, I was disillusioned by politics. But I had done so many deep dives on the Saudi royal family, the Saudi involvement in 9/11, the funding for 9/11, the connections to the Bush administration. So that was huge for me, because I was like the rare liberal at the time that knew that the guys that were being rolled up in the Saudi purge were all the worst guys not just in the Middle East, but they were some of the worst figures in what we'd call the deep state, right? So I'm looking at that going, we've got these drops talking about a plan to save the world and roll up the deep state starting in Saudi Arabia. And then this prince comes out of de facto exile, like educational exile, and rolls up everybody involved in 9/11. I mean, that was a big one.
I'm going to quickly tie all three things together. I think you'll like this. Okay. So, like I said, my moment into the awakening kind of was the Vegas shooting. Now, in that picture in the Do It queue is Jared Kushner. Okay. You can say what you want about Jared Kushner, but in the queues, and you can look it up for yourself, he goes over to Saudi Arabia shortly after the Vegas shooting, and it was totally unscheduled and nobody knew about it. And he goes to talk to, we think, the king that ends up being there. Now, in the Q drops, it kind of seems like Q is making the inference that the king and Trump were having some sort of secret meeting, and that this was like going to be like some sort of double assassination attempt. And that's that also could be some, story weaving by Q, to be honest with you there. But if that's what happened, who knows? But what is legit that you can go research yourself, Kushner went over unscheduled to talk to the Saudi king. Shortly after that is when what Burning Bright is describing as this big purge. Okay. And, Ben Talawid is one of the main princes, and we find out, and it's stuff that you can look up for yourself. He ends up getting like strung up at a Ritz Carlton that they flipped into a jail. And, Trump called him dopey, and, there was information that was gathered from there. So all those things connected, the Q drops, the biggest story, this particular post, and what you're describing on the back end with Saudi Arabia. And then what Burning is describing is this huge purge and wipeout. They went after like 30 or more princes, and there was helicopters coming down from the sky, oddly enough. They were putting people in prison. They were stripping them of their wealth. They were getting information out of them. They were doing all kinds of stuff. So it makes you believe that there was something crazy did happen at the shooting that and Ben Talawid is connected because he actually owned the floor that allegedly there was Trump.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is the Saudi stuff. For anybody who gets like annoyed when Ghost goes into it and everything, it is so paramount to a top-down understanding of why people like us fed into or believed the Q drops early on. It wasn't just because we wanted to and wanted to believe there was good stuff happening. One of the funny things, you mentioned dopey, and I'm sure you've talked about this on Eye of the Storm. So that's a reference to Snow White. It's a reference to these fairy tales. Hillary Clinton is named Alice and referred to essentially as an analog to Alice in Wonderland in the WikiLeaks emails.
Right.
Those were obviously massive for a lot of people when it came to Pizzagate. That was huge for me as well. That's probably what kind of weaponized me in the info war and made me engage in it. But this stuff was what piqued my interest. And just for anybody who maybe is not aware, Saudi Arabia was essentially, obviously it's literally called the kingdom. In the Middle East, it's called the kingdom. But from the perspective of the deep state as we know it, Saudi Arabia was the playground. That was where all the money went to be washed. That was where a lot of these deals were cut. Your mileage may vary on it, but this is, again, something that was kind of funny for me as a liberal. I was disillusioned by the time 2017 rolled around, but I still didn't consider myself a Republican or anything. Connecting the Clintons into the Saudis was massive for me because it allowed me to connect all of my digs when I was a teenager on the Bushes and the Saudis to the Clintons. And then, once you get that piece in place, it's like a loop, a deep state loop. And I think for conservatives, maybe for people like you, it was almost the opposite, where like you probably already were talking about the Clinton crime family for years before that, but then that loops the Bushes in, where you start looking at the Saudi purge. So for anybody who's not aware of this, just briefly, 2017 Saudi purge was a mass arrest of a number of prominent Saudi Arabian princes, government ministers, and business people in Saudi Arabia on the 4th of November 2017. Took place weeks after the creation of an anti-corruption committee led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. I have some things to say on that, but you can take this wherever you want to before I grab that.
I would say, you know, I don't know if this is where you're going or not, but in the Q drops, it's what really stuck in my mind is Q writes, what happened there will happen here. Okay. And
right.
So, you know, I know later in the show, you're probably going to ask me about timelines and what do I expect? What hasn't happened? That's where my mind is. We haven't seen this publicly. I mean, we'll probably get into it a little bit of what we don't see. And Q gave us a few peek behind the curtains along the way. So there has been some things that have happened that, you know, the public isn't fully aware of, but is it going to be something like this? That this is wide open in your face, this type of crazy purge. I don't know, freaking, we'll get to it later in the show too, but Trump's running around talking about filling up Gitmo and filling it over. So I'm pretty excited.
That's a really good point, actually. I want to return to that. And, you know, I think it's good context. Sometimes with any kind of info war, you know, theorizing, if we were following the drops back in 2017, I think there's times when people in the info war, they have built such a foundation of information and theorizing and connecting it all together that you then almost forget how difficult that was initially. You take it for granted. You're like, yeah, the Saudis are good guys, right? Then you'll say that to like a normie, even Republican, like a normie MAGA person. You'll be like, the Saudis are great. What are you talking about? And they look at you like you have three heads, right? Sometimes you realize like, wow, we're still actually in a bubble, not in MAGA, but in sort of people who follow Q and follow the info war. But understanding how powerful the Saudis were is paramount to understanding the full plan. What you just bring up is, I think that retroactively explains why so many of us made some mistakes early on. When you reference like the purge, right? So the mainstream media and a lot of people who like just, whether they were mainstream media or they just they fell out of following the drops and everything. A lot of the reasons for that was people predicting like there's going to be this anti-corruption purge. We're going to roll up the deep state, Black Hawk helicopters, which is pretty funny in the current news cycle. That wasn't just because some drops told us that. That was because the drops told us there was going to be one in Saudi Arabia, and then there was a few days later. So I think that that's good context for people who are like, why did everybody think there was going to be this massive roll-up in the US? It's like, well, the same account that told us that told us about this completely unprecedented roll-up in Saudi Arabia, and then it was bang on. And one more point on it that I want to toss back to you. The term anti-corruption purge that is in that article about Saudi Arabia, I often use the term narrative templates. That is a signal that if you start looking in the info war, in the war of stories, when you see those two terms together, you've got Sovereign Alliance, Q plan, signal, in my opinion. And in some places that you're probably not totally comfortable with. So we believe that the purge of the Saudi princes was a good thing, and it was an anti-corruption purge, right? That's what it was in the narrative. Well, you know who else is famous for anti-corruption purges? Vladimir Putin in the 90s and early 2000s. Xi Jinping in the mid-2000s, especially 2014. He called it the Tigers and Flies campaign, which resulted in 14,000 arrests of Chinese diplomats, magistrates, judges, police, officers, all this kind of stuff, right? It's also going on in Ukraine. And I am also a progenitor of the Our Boy Z theories. Firmly believe that he's under full control and has been for a long time and has been doing a great job of destroying the Prussian proxy state over there. But if you're looking for hints, I think, of who's Sovereign Alliance, whether they were all the time or not, look for that term, anti-corruption purge, and look, more importantly, for the fact that the media, the Western media, demonizes all of these anti-corruption purges.
You know, it would be perfect if you pull up the slides, those first two, the ones in blue. One is a slide that I put together, just an overview of some of the early drops that kind of set my mindset. But more than just setting my mindset, it's going to piggyback off of the points that Bright was just making.
All right.
So let's get into it a little bit.
Zoom or not.
So Q4, the main thing I highlighted there in gold is don't fool yourself into thinking that Obama, Soros, the Roths, Clintons have more power than present day POTUS. Q goes on to say, when you got the president in the United States with the U.S. military, these people don't hold a candle, and that really impacted me. Okay, Down at the bottom is more just like Q says, I've dumped a lot of crumbs over the weekend. There's going to be some shilling, but here's the important part. At this part, we're far enough along into this mission that we can talk about it, and it's not going to jeopardize the operation. And I always thought to myself, would I put these types of, like Q calls this the largest public information dump of all times?
Right.
You know, would I do this if it was going to risk missions and different things, or would I give you guys this information after I cut all the strings? I am like firmly in control. And that's really where my positioning early went, is the Q team wouldn't have done this without having major control. Okay. But Q140 hits me.
It's one of my favorites. I think it's my favorite.
One of the hardest. And I'm only going to jump down to like the middle there where I put an arrow because we just talked about it, but it's going to lead us into what we're going to show next. But why did Trump receive a sword dance when visiting Saudi Arabia? Okay. And then it goes on in the paragraph. And this was like another one of those, like I was talking about the airplane when I saw the Do It Q on November 8th. Well, this is November 11th, 3 days after that Do It Q proof. Q says, now when Q asks questions, Q pretty much answers them later. But Q just asks, what if China, Russia, and others are actually coordinating with Donald Trump to take down the New World Order? Okay. And then Q, and we're going to show this later a little bit too. Who controls North Korea? Who really controls North Korea? Who controls several agencies within the United States, Europe, and abroad? NSA is so vital. The scale prevents events currently going on. But here we go. Why is Russia helping kill ISIS? All right. So that's telling you that they're working. That answers the question, in other words. So Q asks, what if Russia is working with Trump to take out the New World Order? Q answers it by saying, Russia's helping us kill ISIS. Okay. This is not easy to accept or believe, but we're going to give you crumbs and bread. Joint. There is another proof. Joint missions are on their way. You wouldn't have joint missions if you weren't working in coordination with POTUS. So my airplane went up like another 10,000 feet when that Q came out.
That's probably I'll bring this back up, but that's probably my all-time favorite drop. Of course, I started my Substack with the Righteous Russia series. I've said a bunch recently. I used to train with Russians in North Boston, so I kind of got accidentally Russia billed a little bit as a liberal. And that was huge for me. Like I didn't immediately know that it was true. But that's one of those drops, as silly as it sounds, that felt true when you read it. And, the implications of it are huge. But I've got it's a secondhand anecdote, so it doesn't count. But I've told some people that that little section there where it says joint operations underway. So I know somebody who was flying missions in the Middle East in 2017 and 18 during the first Trump administration, and have asked them about all kinds of stuff. So at the time, there was a lot of action going on over Syria, right? Just like Syria's back in the news. Now, is there currently things going on in Syria? I don't know. In my opinion, I think we're watching a narrative translation of things that already occurred in the past. I think there's a lot of that going on, which we'll talk about later tonight. But one little anecdote I have is I remember this person I know, they're a Trump person, but they used to get really annoyed at my Russia propaganda because, they never fought against Russia, but they were kind of trained and indoctrinated to believe, like, you got to be careful about the Russian military and Vladimir Putin and blah, blah, blah. So I asked him, well, you guys were flying joint operations in Syria, right? And what's so interesting to me is the Russia-US pincer moves against ISIS in the Middle East are such a great example of how compartmentalization can create a situation where military, like active military deployments, they do not know that they are engaged in a joint operation. And he had an anecdote. What was so funny is he was thinking he's convincing me Russia is bad because they were flying, he flew in a C-17, and they're flying over Syria. And they get incoming comms by Russia telling them that you're in Russian airspace, or you're in contested airspace, you need to leave. And they were shadowed by 2 Russian fighter jets. I don't know military terminology, whatever. They're shadowed by 2 Russian jets, right? So the Russian jets, in his mind, this is like the dastardly Russians basically warned us out of Syrian airspace, and then they left. But the Russians gave them intelligence that guided them to an ISIS stronghold that they then targeted strikes on. So I'm like, so hold on. What you're telling me is that you were flying a mission looking for an ISIS stronghold. Russia threatened you to get out of the area, but in so doing, guided you toward that ISIS stronghold and then peels back, right? So it's like, it's an example of where, even if you don't have an anecdote like that, or you don't believe it or whatever, you don't have to believe it. The fact that ISIS was essentially destroyed from 2017 to 18 by US and Russian operations means we obviously saw joint operations. And in order for that to happen with no accidents going back and forth the other way, there had to be top level coordination by the people that matter in both countries so that trickles all the way down the chain, and Americans who are flying C-17s, they don't even have to know that they're working with the Russians to be working with the Russians.
I don't know if I got the one from yesterday. We can jump into that, or we could show the videos first, but there was one more cue there in the blue there. The one in the blue just says, Anon says MI6 played ball, and Trump says on the far right, the quote here, MI6 played ball, is from like an Anon on the board, and they help the spying on the citizens for direction. They always do. They ratted out their puppet masters. Q replied back, so confirming, and said, yep, plus a lot more. Again, mind freaking blown that basically Q is telling us that all their intelligence agencies across these other countries are working with us behind the scenes. And that was, again, just absolutely freaking mind blowing. Now, down below, the next thing that I had was about the Trump retruthing of this video. We can either play that, or if you go to the red slide, it hit off of the ISIS take that you just had. So whichever one you want to do first. This one's real quick right here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so let's blow it up. All right. Q2675 was on February 1st, 2019, and it just simply had the image. Okay. So back then, I did a reverse image search to check it out and take a look at it. And the first time this image appeared was back in 2014 under this is the Obama era there. But this article was attached to this picture. Okay. So U.S. And its allies appear to have conducted further airstrikes against the oil fields controlled by the Islamic State of Iraq, Syria, ISIS, Eastern Syria, according to the group monitoring the conflict in this country. So on January 1st, 2019, Q gave us this. The image connects to this situation with ISIS and U.S., dropping bombs in that area. So what happens over here on the right? February 1st, exact Delta, Scavino is tweeting out, Trump orders airstrikes on ISIS leaders in Somalia, and Trump also slams home, I ordered this morning precision military strikes on senior ISIS attack planner and other terrorists he recruited and led in Somalia. February 1st, exact Delta of Q that we showed you in the beginning. That is freaking amazing, mind-blowing.
That's huge. I hadn't seen that one. And then, but, back on, it's a pretty similar analog to the Syria stuff, where one of the things that I'd pointed out at the time recently, in what was that, December, with all the Assad stuff, the media was talking about how the Russians were withdrawing, right? Because they had backed Assad, according to the narrative, and Al-Qaeda, these rebels, had just caught everybody by surprise, right? But even the media was admitting they met no resistance from Assad's forces, right? So you've had this war going on for years, and all of a sudden, 1 month, there's just no resistance at all from Assad or from his loyalists. There's no resistance from Russian military, and then we're told that the Russians are withdrawing from Syria. Assad's in Moscow, may or may not have been in Moscow the whole time. And I remember Sergei Lavrov, he's one of those guys, you always look at Scavino as one of the main comms guys when it comes to the Trump administration. I look at that in Russia, and for me, Sergei Lavrov is one of the, he'll just tell you, if you're paying attention, what's going on. And I remember they had said, looks like the Russians are withdrawing from the port in Syria, and looks like you guys are retreating. And, the Western media is trying to portray it as you've lost control of what they're saying is a Russian proxy state. And Lavrov responded and said, I can understand why it might look that way to Western nations, but what you're seeing are actually planned maneuvers. Now, whether or not you agree with that is secondary to the fact that within 12 hours, we're told that a mass bombing campaign is launched by U.S. Central Command that hits 75 ISIS targets, precision targets, in Syria, right? So when you just lay out that timeline, you mean to tell me this totally asymmetric, unplanned event occurs where Al-Qaeda separatists roll into Syria, Assad backs out, all Assad's loyalists back out, the Russian military leaves, and U.S. Central Command mobilizes a precision strike force to take out all of these ISIS strongholds? There's a term that I don't know if you guys have used it on Eye of the Storm, but that I talk about a lot. Russian maneuver defense is really the theory of Russian warfare. Okay. And man, to me, what we saw in Syria was sovereign alliance maneuver defense. It was a joint operation of Russian and Syrian forces withdrawing, allowing ISIS to come out of there's whatever strongholds they had left, and then the U.S. hits them. You're going to tell me that the U.S. wasn't coordinating with Russia about precision airstrikes in that area? There's no way, and what you point out in Somalia is the same thing.
You just led me right to the next. Yeah, keep going back up to the green one, and let's start on the other side here. So what this was a smasher proof, and it bangs right off of what Burning was describing. Okay, so Q298 dated December 7th, 2017, and there's Assad in the picture. Okay, yeah. So December 7th, 2017, Q gives us the picture of Assad. What happens on December 7th, 2024? The bombing that Burning's describing. So is that just a freaking coincidence? And go tab over just a little further so we could talk about it. Syrian government appears to have fallen, taken out a 50-year rule of the Assad family, December 7th, but we gave him an out, and he was able to take his family and get out of there first, right? And I think he went to Russia, right? So exactly what you're saying. This is orchestrated. It's all played. And the deltas are for people like myself and Abs and our team to pick up on and say, that's not a freaking coincidence that lined up so perfectly 7 years later to the day that Q gave us. So Q says future proves past, and that's an example. Now, we didn't know that in 2017 when Q dropped it. It took us a while to kind of figure out that some things would lead to others. But that was great, man. And
we'll do the sword dance next, because I know people love that one. These are just basically what I had asked Stormy was what I wanted to do is kind of go back through some of the all-timers to us. I mean, we're going through we're kind of mixing and matching some of the all-timers and some of the recent stuff, and the Assad Syria stuff is recent. What strikes me about that, about the drops that you were just going over, is those weren't in my head, right? Like, I had read all the Q drops. I've read about, I mean, it's kind of funny for somebody who writes about the Sovereign Alliance all the time and all that stuff and narrative warfare. The most read article I ever wrote on Burning Bright is We Are Q. It's all about the Q drops. Obviously, it's a massive seismic movement that's like infected in a good way the minds of this whole generation. But what strikes me about that is I was completely unaware, or at least wasn't conscious of those drops that you just brought up, the December 7th ones. Just wasn't thinking about it, right? But to me, this is an encouraging thing. Because even though I didn't have those drops in my head,
you made it.
I knew by the way my mind works is all narrative, and I'm looking at the narrative going, well, what a convenient narrative. You're telling me that that the Russians withdrew and Assad withdrew and Assad's with the Russians right now, and no Russian soldiers got hurt, and the U.S. precision strikes, and who are they striking? ISIS. And you probably think similarly to me. I don't always take at face value it's ISIS that we're hitting. Do I think that we did wipe out ISIS? Yes. But as we know in this community, who is ISIS really? Who founded ISIS? So I leave open wiggle room to suggest, are we hitting bunkers in the desert? Or, you could sub into me ISIS with deep state, right? Operations are being conducted against deep state operators. Whoever that is, your mileage may vary on. I think a lot of that stuff, when people are like, don't you think anything real is actually happening in the Donbass? Yeah, sure. I think a lot of Nazis are getting killed in the Donbass, or did get killed a couple of years ago. But, all that's just to say, the way your mind works, you're mapping immediately, like December 7th, put these puzzle pieces together, future proves past, and then it gets you generally on target, right? Like you said, like a 40,000 foot view. We don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know if Assad is a good guy, a bad guy. I like how you just framed it. Maybe he was given an out or something like that. But the way I approached it was, this story looks exactly like Russian maneuver defense, and that the Americans just helped the Russians conduct it. And one more point on it would be, the Biden administration seemed to have no idea any of this was going on as usual, right? So it was like another thing that the U.S. military was doing that the Biden administration had no idea about. But it shows you that in the info war, there are so many cognitive pathways to the mountaintop. You can map Q drops, or you can follow the story, and they're probably going to take you generally to the same area.
Oh, no, I'll throw on a funny story. I know you like stories, but in the middle of all this, Don Jr. is trolling all of it from every direction. He's tweeting out, hey, man, why is Biden dropping bombs? He's like, my father didn't drop bombs on people. Like, whoa, like, holy cow, Biden's starting World War III. Holy cow. He was trolling because, if you believe the types of things that we believe, this was a white hat operation, and Trump probably had the go button to do it. But Donald Trump Jr. knows that. but he is just clowning everybody in that whole entire thing by just sitting there on Twitter saying, "Oh no, freaking Biden is bombing people. What is he doing?" You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, what it also reminded me of. Well, I guess the Syria situation reminds me of this. There's a few situations, but the Kabul withdrawal was huge for a lot of us. The way it all went down, to me, it was the first really big example of the "it had to be this way" sort of stuff that's in the Q drops, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned like the Biden administration, you've got to go through the darkness. We all, I think, get that on a macro level. But I think that goes further. I think, as the drops suggest, a lot of these refrains, there's many different readings of them, right? They apply to many things.
Yep.
For me, the Kabul withdrawal was a great example of what are the net effects? How did that situation end? Like what ended? U.S. occupation in Afghanistan ended on the back of that, right? Is the ending a good thing or a bad thing? Inarguably, it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
So, and then of course the Doha Agreement, you're like, man, and then however many $80 billion of military equipment get left behind for the Taliban. And then what happens in the weeks following, even though the media tells us they're going to be parading women through the streets and like burning kids alive and everything. No, you know what they did with that military equipment? They started hunting down the remnants of ISIS in the region and killing them, which is what they were told to do in accordance with the Doha Agreement. So, but then on a narrative level, it was catastrophic for Joe Biden. It was catastrophic for the regime.
Yeah.
And then there's so many examples of that I think what you're pointing out about Don Jr. with Syria, there are so many examples of it. It had to be done this way, not just to wake people up. It had to be done this way because Trump could not be in power while these Gordian knots in the Middle East are unwound, because he couldn't be seen as inactive during basically while these things happen, while this decoupling takes place.
And that's why Trump, I believe, and you probably would be on this path too, is when Trump says, yeah, Russia would have never invaded Ukraine on my watch. He's telling you basically that was another reason for the pause. So we don't get stuck to those things. And you would have like CNN with a daily counter of, war on Trump's watch, where we slide in, Goofy Joe, and they don't even talk about it in that way. There's no, there is. Imagine if that went down under the Trump administration, So
Russia invading it. Yeah, and I talked about this last week with Zach, but I've been talking about it for a couple of years on the Power Hour. I firmly agree. One of my I call it international devolution, but I named it the Sovereign Alliance, whatever you want to call it. The alliance that Q Drop 140 talks about. That drop stuck in my head ever since I saw it, and just my mind always goes to I like trying to look for gravity of Sovereign Alliance. That's just the implications of that being true on a worldwide scale are so powerful and encouraging to me, far beyond the American awakening. Because if the rest of the world doesn't follow along, then it's like, what are we really doing? We're just going to be this island nation that's great for a century, and then we collapse again because the world sucks. So I think it's really important that there's a sovereign alliance going on. And to your point, I've been saying that for years. If some people get annoyed when I say it, it's either as important or more important the devolution operation and the Q continuity of government operations take place for the global game board to shift more so than the American game board. Because I think we're seeing a shift of a different kind in the US. It's largely being translated through political means, like a political story and a governmental overhaul. But if you're looking at the Azov battalion in the Donbass and whatever the hell's been going on in Syria and whatever's been going on in Kabul with the Afghan military funded by us, right? That stuff had to be untangled. And yeah, Trump could not be in power. So this is when I often say, Donald Trump is not lying to you when he said, because we were like, oh, you talk about sovereign alliance, but then Trump's out here saying Putin never would have done this. He's telling you the truth while winking and going, Putin never would have gone into the Donbass. What he leaves unsaid is, which is why I needed to take a break. Right? Like that's, you know, and then you can apply that to a lot of different theaters, I think.
Oh yeah. And like you pointed to was who benefited. That's always like part of my thought process is I always say in my head anyway, I say good things that happen for MAGA probably aren't a coincidence, and they probably had to be like really driven and constructed to make it happen. And some roadblocks had to be cleared and these types of things. So I look at like the end game to also kind of circle around and say, how did this really start? But in your mind too, it's like at the end of the day, the result is the most important thing. You can sit there and argue, and that's why really early in my journey, I threw out the hats out the window. I even I had a YouTube channel for like 3 episodes, and they yanked me. But the first one I did was I took the camera on a red hat and a white, or a black hat and a white hat, and I said, don't worry about either one of these. Just focus on the mega hat. That's all that matters. And I gave examples like Lindsey Graham. Everybody hates Lindsey Graham. Does it really matter if he's good or bad at this point? He just right here, we played it on Eye of the Storm leading into the show. He's voting for RFK, Tulsi, and Cash. Does that sound like a bad guy right now? Doesn't matter. He's doing the things that we need, whether he's in his heart, in his head, or hostage. Probably a hostage is my take on Lindsey Graham. But at the end of the day, the result's the same. So why does it matter? Why does it matter at this point? Is he a white hat or a black hat? He's doing what we need him to do. That's
I totally agree. And one of my favorite examples of that that I think there's a lot of sauce to is I mentioned him earlier, but Volodymyr Zelensky. So I've done a lot of digging on him, and what's so funny is I'll get hit with whenever I make suggestions that, to your point, the net effects of Volodymyr Zelensky's deployments, actual and narrative, are good. People freak out, sort of. And when I say that, I mean even more so than our boy Blue Joe Biden. And one of the things that they'll hit me with often is, he's just a puppet, right? Most people are aware that for all the talk we do of actors and, what makes a good movie. Volodymyr Zelensky was an actor, a comedic actor in Ukraine. He was in in over that part of the world, a famous show called, I believe it translates to Hero of the People, where he played like an everyman, sort of a Donald Trump figure, actually, is how they portray him in that drama series, where everyone in Ukraine knows that Ukraine is corrupt, right? Like first of all, there's no such thing as a Ukrainian. But besides that, the people over there, they know that their government is corrupt. So a lot of people call Zelensky like the Ukrainian Obama. In the US, the brilliance of the character of Barack Obama was that they introduced him at a time when belief in patriotism was at an all-time low, and the corruption of the military-industrial complex was so obvious to people, especially liberals, that they were just looking for a charismatic leader who was going to come out and say, like, this war is wrong, the Republicans did it, right? Zelensky was that over in Ukraine. And people will talk about, oh, he's a puppet, etc. That's exactly why a guy like that would be so easy to just untie his strings, put him under different management, and have him do what he does best, which is being an actor, right? Because if you're Zelensky, I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm saying he's being used. And
Trump does.
Exactly. And some people could go like, okay, well, you're looking for things that map onto your theories. Like you're looking for those, a feedback loop to prove your own theories. There are ways, in my opinion, that you can map these things. And my favorite one is reverse indicators.
Yeah.
You know who you look to? You look to the whip and lash of the enemy's words. It's one of the things I always say. And in Ukraine, you know who hates Volodymyr Zelensky? The Azov Battalion and every Ukrainian politician, judge, lawyer, police captain who is involved with the Azov Battalion. An easy example of this is former heavyweight boxing champion and current mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko. Klitschko has been basically running a coup against Zelensky. Why? Because Zelensky sent the Azov Battalion into a series of Russian maneuver defense ambushes from 2022 to 2024 that resulted in them basically being completely wiped out. And so, these are those things where, and on a narrative level, what are the net, to your point, what are the net effects of Volodymyr Zelensky? He's exposed NATO. He's exposed EU money laundering. He's this week in the news talking about how he doesn't know where the money went. Guys, I bet you he's telling you the truth. I bet he doesn't know where the money went. And, so we talk about Biden in the States, but when you're talking about the European theater and the Russian theater, we haven't had a bigger red pill over the last few years than Zelensky.
And our shipping our tax dollars abroad, that was a big awakening for a lot of people too, where
Huge.
Especially where we're having these natural or unnatural, depending on your opinion, disasters. People are begging for $700. Meanwhile, the same day they're shipping 30 billion to Ukraine, and I believe that was part of the exposure operation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and an easy way to wrap this one up. I've said this in my writing a million times. Guess what? It takes two to make a perfect phone call. You guys focus on comms a lot, and a lot of your comms are looking for maps with the drops. I focus on comms as well, and one of the ways I focus on them is Trump's asides. When he makes his little aside comments, he finally told you in 2024 that his asides are called weaves, and they're very important, and you should pay attention to them. But one of the things he always said about Zelensky was, we had a great phone call. We had a perfect phone call. Look at the net effects of that phone call. What was it? The exposure of the Biden crime family, the quid pro Joe, all of that was exposed via the Zelensky phone call and then some.
117%.
Did you want to hit the Saudi, the sword dance thing, or do you want to go in a different?
I just want to show the slide that shows the two Trump truths on it, because that's important. So in the Q drops, Q says repeats are important, or repeats are important. But Trump retweets this video on June 10th, 2023. You can see in the bottom there, Trump retruthed it. And then again, in July 17th, Trump retruthed this same video that we're about to play. But baked into this video is so much information. It's like 5 minutes, but it not only is got like 10 Q proofs baked into the video, but concentrate on the submitted. And the fact that Trump retruthed a video that is clearly made by Q people, because there's all this Q language baked into the video, was like amazing in itself. But when we're talking about this, like, how much control are we in, and when did it start, and all these things, pull up the airplane another 10,000 feet after watching this video. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of the great ones. We can play this whole thing.
Systematic destruction of the old guard is in the Qs. Right there. It opens up with a Q line.
Yep. Yeah, and the sword dance has been back in the news. Now, I'm sure you guys must have talked about on Eye of the Storm. We had a very recent sword dance, didn't we? And Melania's dress, I'm not usually somebody who does that, but Melania's dress, if she wasn't trying to recall Saudi princes, I don't know what the hell she was trying to do there. The black and white one.
Yeah.
I can turn the audio off on this one, but yeah, I mean,
right there.
Now the Israel stuff is interesting, right?
Big.
So that's your mapping of Netanyahu. You don't have to like him, right?
Right.
I am curious to see though how the story goes with some of these people.
Vatican. Q says the Pope will have a bad May at some point. Submitted.
Well, that'll be interesting to watch.
The EU. And we've seen some of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Macron was kind of the first to bend the knee at the advent of Trump 2.0. NATO is going to be dissolved. There's Jens Stoltenberg there. I'm very familiar with him. He was the one usually sparring with Sergei Lavrov.
I'm in the front. Get out of my way.
And then we've got Sovereign Alliance bros, Viktor Orban. He's one of the sovereign bros.
Look what she's wearing there, bro.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this is...
Submitted.
The fact that Trump truthed this out twice, to your point, this isn't just like, oh, it has a couple analogs to the drops. This is, to your point, a Q video laying out the international nature of the plan. Ghost favorite there, our boy Kim.
Right.
He's got to be the most lovable of the Sovereign Alliance.
Maybe we'll show what I ran through with that next after this.
Yeah. I think he's become Putin's apprentice, and I think Trump feels a little bit left out when they're like riding around in cars together on their state visits. State visit plus.
China
do you have Q
submitted.
Plus?
President Trump was the only president to go to areas of China and such.
And it's worth noting as well that when you see the word submitted, at least in my view, I think it's all talking about the deep state, right? Some of the deep state might be the guys in these videos. Some of them, though, I've done a lot of digging on Xi. I'm actually working on collating a lot of the research I did in 2023 about Xi. And man, interesting guy when you look at his background, when you look at the fact that his father was excommunicated by the Chinese Communist Party, the anti-corruption purge he's gone on. I see it less as Xi Jinping submitting to Trump. I see it more as working with him.
Right.
But some of these guys submitted, of course.
Yep. We just had Trudeau there and Merkel submitted. Yeah, to your point, you can go on and you're with me on it with Putin. So Putin was like the only world leader I ever heard say that the new world order is Satan.
Yep.
And Q quotes that. We've had a lot of royal news.
Well, now, actually, speaking of Trudeau and royalty, that is getting into the normie sphere. I think we should be paying attention, guys, to the unraveling of Canada's relationship with the British Crown. Here we go. My all-time favorite InfoWar moment. All-time favorite right there.
Foul the ball. Q wrote foul the ball, too.
And remember, they freaked out on the back of that Helsinki press conference. That was the tripling down of Marussia. One of my favorite little sayings is Russia collusion is real and it's a good thing. It's just not real in the way they think, right?
Right. Is that a bad thing?
I am a proud Russian propagandist. I might moonlight, though. I think 2025 is going to be big for Trump Xi. There's going to be a lot of kayfabe there.
He had his hand on the Bible, that first one. I saw that. And no, it wasn't that they were late getting the Bible to him. There was something in there. I think it was almost like a devolution proof. But where we go one, we go off. Hello. That's like the most signature Q line in the drops. And we'll talk a little bit about the tie-ins to JFK and stuff. But man, all right, witnessing the old guard, a systematic destruction, all those countries submitting, ends with another signature Q line. Twice he put that out there, twice. Okay, so
it does get to the point where you're just like, man, how do you argue against it at this point? It'd be different if we weren't seeing such wholesale change, right? Even though this show is the narrative, and I talk about the narrative, it's not because I think it's only narrative. It's because I think the world is changing. It's just being translated to us via narrative, right? Via these stories. But we are absolutely seeing, when you look at all the factions that are laid out there, what's going on with them? There's a bifurcation. We've got Canada and the EU and NATO and France and Israel kind of all in various states of exposure. Then we've got Russia and China and North Korea and India on the rise. Like, totally different. All the BRICS nations are on the rise in global standing, in wealth, in, GDP, marching into the future. And then we've got this Western hegemon, old guard, that Trump had horrible relations with. And, one of the little comms that I always think is interesting is, even though it sounds silly, anytime Donald Trump talks about any of these people in the West, any of these Western leaders, he insults them, right? Just as simple as that. And anytime he talks about Xi, he says he's the smartest guy he's met. Anytime he talks about Putin, he talks about how strong he is. And like anytime he talks about Kim, he says, I have a great relationship with him. And he just allows people to think whatever they want. And they're like, we called Putin strong. That means he's saying we got to fight him. Like, nope, he just said he's strong. And he said Xi's smart. And he said Kim is somebody he knows really well.
Goes into what I think is a good transition, is the Rocket Man. We'll just call it like the Rocket Man proof or whatever. This was a pretty cool dig on my part, I must say, because I went back, right there. So I went back to Trump's tweets even prior to the Q operation, and so September 17, 2017. Now to Burning's point, this was after they're like, let's go ride roller coasters together. But before that, this was the narrative was like Trump and Kim. He's calling him Rocket Man. He's got the finger on the button. Everybody's freaking out. Now this is before the Q operation, so even I'm sitting there like, what is going on here? This is a little weird, right? So he's calling Kim Rocket Man, and he's saying my button's bigger than yours, and mine works, and like mainstream news is like going bananas that we're like on the step of World War III. Okay, so again, on September 23rd, he talks about Little Rocket Man, and October 1st, Little Rocket Man. Okay, and then on the bottom there, again, October 1st, he's talking about Little Rocket Man hasn't worked in 25 years. And Clinton failed, Bush failed, Obama failed, I won't, and all this type of stuff. Okay. And Nan put it together that there was a multi-meaning here when so in the drops, and this we'll get into the hats again with Musk. Okay.
Yep.
Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he this? Is he that? Q makes an inference that Musk was helping the deep state or whatever, helping arm North Korea. Okay. So, but the Anons, when Trump was saying Rocket Man about Kim, there was a double meaning that only the people that read the Q drops understood that Musk wrote a book called Rocket Man. So Q told us Musk weaponized North Korea, and Trump is calling the leader of North Korea Rocket Man. So that's the connection. So Anon wrote, holy shit, all the president's past tweets make that reference to Musk. You magnificent bastard, Q. You read the book. And Q says, do you believe in coincidences? Okay. But let's roll down one more. Now let's tab to the right. I want to get that pink box as best as we can get it. So Anon writes on the board on it's a coming situation, March 8th, 2018. So just as an Anon on the chan saying, okay, here we go, Anons. This is huge, because they're announcing that Trump is going to meet with Kim at the time. North Korea is going to meet with Trump. Wow, mega exclamation points. Q comes back to that post and says, actually, he already did. Remember when we gave you the pictures? Everything has meaning, and it's going to break the MSN. So the MSN is saying that we elected Donald Trump, and he's taking us to World War III. And at the same time, they've already met. They've already settled it. Everything we saw in the news was a complete show. Okay, so let's pan down a little bit. I think we have a little more on it, or I'm not sure if I do or not. Yeah. All right. So this is what Q is referencing when he says, reconnect what we're talking about. So November 14th, 2017, Trump just got in office and he says, thank you, Asia, out Air Force One. And then Q says on the left here, thank you, Kim, deal made, clowns out, strings cut. We took control. Iran next. Okay. So, man, lift that airplane up another 10,000 feet when I read this. And this became what I called the white hat playbook. That from that, I understood that what Donald Trump does for optics and what the news says and all these things most likely have a totally different meaning behind the scenes. And we are being led to this for a reason, for optic reasons, to wake people up or get things done or different purposes. But that was definitely a story that Kim and Trump were not at each other's throats with their fingers on the button, not just about to take us to World War III. Q let us know they already met, they already worked it all out. And then where that spins from there, they end up in the Forbidden City and all this, where like the first president to ever go. And that brings in your points with China leaders. But that was just amazing to me. And when people say, why do you think Patriots are in control? That moment there was one of the big reasons where, because I just remember what if you didn't read these drops and you didn't really hear about this, what did you think? You thought that, man, this guy is in Danger City. The guy from The Apprentice, it's got his finger on the nuclear button. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I remember just even from a public narrative perspective, it was surreal. I think we're starting to get the idea here. I mean, I think we were all varying degrees of confident that we were going to win. Nothing can stop what's coming, all that, right? But it certainly feels even more so for anybody who was doubting it that, yes, we are watching some version of a movie. We've had conversations about this privately, and I'm sure, you talk about it all the time. We don't know, right? We don't know how much of it is a movie. We don't know what is literally meant by control. To your earlier point, we don't know exactly what color hats these guys wear. Elon Musk is a really interesting one that you bring up. Yeah. I've written a lot about him, and he's interesting because I think I had a personal evolution with how I viewed him because I was a former liberal. And my opinion on Musk is actually that he is a white hat who was working with deep state people. I think that you're getting some tells about that with some of his narrative deployments that he slips in when he talks about former business partners, when he talks about some of these rivals. Now, I know that it's possible he could have been one of them, and now he's on our side, right? He's controlled. That makes sense to me. The reason I actually think we are watching somebody who is one of the good guys, doesn't mean he's not flawed, is the way the story was crafted with Elon. It's one of the most brilliant stories in the info war, in my opinion. And the reason I said, one of the things I'd said in 2022, I think it was 22, yeah. I wrote an article called Narrative Pincer. And this was long before Elon and Trump had publicly aligned themselves with each other. In fact, at the time, the reason I wrote that article is they were sniping at each other in the media. Musk was a maverick and he was starting to step off of the liberal reservation, but him and Trump were sparring with each other quite a bit. And I wrote this article, Narrative Pincer, and suggested, hey, if Patriot control goes further than we even thought, and further back in time than we even thought, what would be the best possible way to unify as many people from the American political spectrum as you could get? Well, Donald Trump, as a quote-unquote Republican, he's only going to reach in the first stages of the story a certain number of Americans. And then maybe he's going to reach some disillusioned liberals like me. Elon Musk, though, he rode the opposite sentiment to public prominence, right? He was like a liberal superhero. He was kind of liberal, libertarian, green energy, EVs, all that kind of stuff. And that's why at the time I was like, this guy's a black hat. He's pushing us toward the Great Reset, the Green New Deal. Now, what's so funny is Tesla has been the worst thing to happen to the Green New Deal. And that takes a few moments for people to get. But if you start looking into it, he rug pulled all of these other Western companies and European companies trying to push us into the Green New Deal by making the new technology so good and so efficient that it's actually going to decrease cost of living rather than increasing it. He's not going to do carbon credits. And I noticed that all his interviews, even before he publicly aligned with Donald Trump, he was talking about how overpopulation was a myth, climate change was a myth, like these things. And he had ridden that leftist ideology up into like the Tony Stark. I often say that he is based on Tony Stark. I'm not joking. I literally believe that the Patriot script writers based the character of Elon Musk on Tony Stark. And then how do you square that with his partnerships with Reid Hoffman and on and on and on? Well, some of these figures, maybe they were in bed with snakes and they didn't know it, right? Like we're never going to know this stuff, as you said earlier. But what if you were a good guy who was part of these early companies, these tech companies, and then you find out what's going on? Like, those are the exact kind of figures that patriots, long-running patriots, would probably try to target and say, like, listen, come to us. We're going to show you some stuff. We're going to leave you right where you are, though. And, you know, they used Elon for their purposes. The reason I think he's a white hat in terms of being, like, a good guy is the Tesla thing had to go back so far in time that I really think that company is part of what's being used to disclose to the American people a lot of the technology that's been hidden from us. That's not a deep state thing. And that was a long time before Q that Tesla started. So I kind of think we have an example in Elon of like a silent running operator for quite a while.
How I talk about it is Donald Trump wouldn't have made him the highest paid contractor in history if, like you're saying, was he always white? I'm not sure.
Yeah, who knows?
It's like, did he flip or is he always good? At that point, when Donald Trump took office and is paying Musk to do like the most probably important stuff that we're going to probably find out in the future, between what SpaceX does and what Space Force does, it's probably going to be the biggest leap in our generation. Okay. He wouldn't have been able to access these federal sites and do these crazy launches that I'm here in Florida and I'm able to go and check them out. It's awesome. I've seen Starlink go up and these different rockets that go up and come back to Earth and land on these pods. It's just the most amazing things in the world. But he's getting paid with our tax dollars on our land to do these things and to do like, you know, he says, oh yeah, I'm just putting up satellites. Okay. Are we sure? Are we sure? He says it's not weapons or anything like that, but who knows, right?
Who knows? How is Trump going to all of a sudden build an Iron Dome over the United States? Is it perhaps already there?
And here's a full wrap. The Q operation started 10/28/17. Musk, in between, got all this money from the Trump administration, buys Twitter, $44 billion, I think. Mm-hmm. When does it close? October 28th, 2022. An exact 5-year delta of the Q operation starting is when Musk became owner of CEO of Twitter.
And
what?
Loop that. Look at how all these things loop. Loop that back around to our Saudi Arabia conversation. I don't know if we mentioned it. Al Walid bin Talal, the big baddie of the Saudi family that bin Salman wrapped up, he was the largest single shareholder of Twitter, and we are told was blocking an Elon Musk takeover until he all of a sudden acquiesced to it. One more note on that. If you want more sauce on it, Forbes magazine, you know, they do their like richest lists. A few years ago, Al-Walid bin Talal was ranked, I think, number 7, something like that, richest men in the world. Forbes removed him from the list because they said they can no longer independently verify that he controls his assets. And then what happens after that? Al-Walid votes to allow for Elon Musk's purchase to go through. Chris Paul's a broken record on this. We've talked about it on the Power Hour plenty with John. It is impossible to call yourself an info warrior and believe that the most powerful information dissemination program of all time was handed over to an independent, to a Trump DOD contractor. It is impossible to believe that that was available for him to purchase from the deep state. They don't need the money. They need the weapon. And the weapon looks like it was seized from them rather than purchased.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And I love this comment here from Kick Dreaming. Anybody who's been reading on my Substack, the Weapons of the Future series, one of them is called Amerigeddon, one of them is called The Bridge. The Bridge is all about Elon Musk and Tesla. And, one of the things I've said before is I used to think of the Tesla name of that company as mockery of us, as in this is another deep state thing where they're using, a name and they're subverting it. I now see it as the complete opposite. This is patriot mockery of them. This is patriots. When Donald Trump goes to a Bitcoin conference in Nashville and tells the audience that his uncle worked at MIT, his Uncle John, right after Michael Saylor gives a keynote about Nikola Tesla energy and vibration and frequency and the future monetary system, and Elon Musk endorses him, he's telling you that the Tesla thing is disclosure. Like you said, we're going in technological directions that we never could believe. And as you are aware, the Q drops suggest this, right? When they say, in my opinion, that drop that says we're going to show you a new world, I think that goes far beyond what a lot of Q people think. I think that you need to think bigger. Yeah. You need to think like, imagine a world with the sort of technology in your wildest dreams that has been suppressed from you. I personally think that's what the drops are referencing when they say we're going to show you a new world.
I have that noted for when we get to the point where you're like, what Q drops are impactful to me. That was one of the ones I noted. But to your earlier question about, we're in the golden age and what's really kind of connecting up with the new administration. So one of the first ones out of the gate was when Trump said he was going to nominate Radcliffe, and it hit an exact Q delta. When Trump made that announcement, Radcliffe was in the queues. It was an exact delta. I showed it at GART. We went through the Assad one, the Trump chart too, by the way, the big magical chart that he points to, that's like a crossover of so many different things. Right. And it hits more on the devolution side really than the Q side, but it's connected.
For sure.
Right,
Evolution's part of the Q operation. They're both part of the same operation, right? I mean, that's one of the you should, I'm sure you've talked about this, but just maybe even just briefly, to me, that's one of the most, and to John, I know, it's one of the most frustrating bits of FUD is that people will try to create this divisive thing between the Q operation and devolution. The reason I liked the devolution research so much is that it codified the Q drops to me even more, right? I mean, it seems like you feel the same way about that. These things are not contradictory at all.
What I've said to John in private is, if you just called it the executive orders instead of devolution, people get hung up on the word.
Right.
I said, it's primarily researching what is written for public people can read these executive orders. That's pretty much the whole thing is information that you can get. So it's not like John just grabbed shit out of the air and said, but yeah, to your point, the heavily in the Q drops is read the damn executive orders, extremely important. So that is, and we've had John on Eye of the Storm, and we bounced off the Q boards and showed different parts in it. But that chart where it kind of has Trump saying that's when I left office, that's pointing to like April 1st. And we did a research on Eye of the Storm, and Shannon on my team found it was that was when Trump brought up this whole COVID presser, all armed with the military, and started talking about like we're freaking going to war, and started talking about like martial law and tribunal. Like, hello, what he's talking about? Like the flu? What's this? Why does he have all these generals?
The invisible enemy, right?
That was that day. That's where everything crossed over. The arrow on that chart that Trump points to as his favorite chart is that day in time. So, you know, I personally think that's like when different levers were pulled, and I don't believe Trump would have walked away in 2020 and just handed it to the deep state. And I think we were protected in certain ways. The other one is obviously we just had the hearings with Kash Patel, but that is one of the easiest but biggest Q proofs is Kash Patel, a name to remember. So, you know, when Q first wrote that, nobody knew who this guy was. He was like on the Nunez staff, and but it ended up to be a proof even before what I would say the recent day today, you know, with him being FBI director appointee, was he did raise up the ranks and had some important positions in the Trump administration. Obviously, that's why John says, you know, John Patel is honor for Kash Patel. But
Kash loves him. He's just messing about.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So that was a huge connector, you know, on top of the previous, like you say, multi-meanings exist. You got to evolve with certain things. So I used it as a Q proof when Kash went up the ranks to the levels in the DOD. He had like top position or assistant top position there in the DOD. But obviously being named Trump's appointee for FBI director, that is a major Q proof that shows everything coming back around. But the sometimes the past can find the future one is in my red slides there, and we can roll through those slides if you like.
Those are big for me. I'm excited to write one of my many articles I have planned for you to look at in particular about this. All right, where are we? Right here? Is this it? No.
Yeah.
Starting here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right.
Okay, yeah.
So the Q558, I had previously on Eye of the Storm saying, keep that Q in mind. Because Q said, remember this day on that date. So I didn't include it in this graph, but Q said January 19th, keep that date in mind. It's going to have a big thing. So I was already talking about January 19th. Let's see what happens. And Q next to that had written this Q that said, timing is everything, State of the Union. Okay. The bottom Q here, 3826, was an embedded post by Scavino. Okay. And over on the right, this picture that's embedded is Scavino took a behind the scenes of the State of the Union in 2020. So that's the picture of Donald Trump heading into the State of the Union address back in 2020. But the incredible part of it and how this kind of wraps around is what on that Q, what he writes on the bottom. On the bottom of it, this way. Yeah, sometimes the past can find the future. Okay, so that's what Q, Scavino, everybody was talking basically about in 2020, February of 2020. Okay, now let's see how, scroll down to the next one. Now we go to Trump is inaugurated, and on January 20th, he gets his POTUS handle back on Twitter, and his first freaking post is a video, America is back. Every single day I'm fighting for you, every breath of my body, etc. But the 11-second mark in that video, his first post as POTUS 47, embedded at the 11-second mark in that video, happens to be the picture that basically they put a flag in the sand in the Q drops and said, remember this day, remember sometimes the future can prove the past, or whatever it said exactly. But it was like this moment. So I was like, oh my God, this is like proof that, in my mind, it was proof that Dan, Q, and Trump was letting us know that the pause was necessary. And yeah, so it exactly says sometimes the past can find the future. Now, again, remember the State of the Union, okay? The timing is everything. and I didn't include it here, but in between here and where we're going to go next on Eye of the Storm, Ab, Shannon, Rev, and Kim and Barb and us were putting together things that it further connected because Speaker Johnson invited Donald Trump to speak on, we're going to call it the State of the Union on March 4th. So that I didn't include that in the chart here, but it connects to that. Okay, so on the left here on January 28th, these guys were talking about my graph on their show, the Elijah Stream show, and they showed my graph and they were talking about it. So I retweeted that on the 30th. Okay. And I went back to my post that I had written that showed that graphic on the 20th, when the day of the inauguration, and I retweeted it like the morning of the 31st. Okay. And that was, I had written those comments there about what the Q says. Sometimes the past can find the future. And hey, look at Donald Trump's first tweet as POTUS. Okay. Now below, the next one is so crazy that Scavino on the 31st, hours after I retweeted those two things, freaking tweets out the still that he did in that queue. And that was just freaking mind-blowing.
Just in case it wasn't clear enough.
On top of that, he retrued Speaker Johnson and dropped the thing. So what he did there was he kind of confirmed everything that we were saying, Eye of the Storm, about all these different data sets, how it connected. And I put a gold box around the word consequential because we were tracking that word on Eye of the Storm for before Speaker Johnson was won his election or whatever, however you want to say it. But there's the March 4th, Tuesday, March 4th, where he's going to speak to Congress, whether they officially call it State of the Union or not. And Az's point to a lot of this in the middle of all that March 4th used to be inauguration day back in the day. So it connected with so many different things that remember this day, State of the Union. We had the Trump, the Scavino tweet back in 2020. The very first tweet by POTUS hits everything. And then Scavino, I don't know if he was watching Eye of the Storm or he saw my tweets, but it was pretty crazy that, I did the first post on the 20th when inauguration happened. Then we did the shows, and then I repumped it up, and then hours later he pumped it back out, but not the video, the exact still shot from the cues, and he threaded Speaker Johnson with it, which was also things we were attaching to that decode. Crazy.
Well, I mean, that's a huge one. On the back of that, I guess like a kind of a 1-2 question, and we've talked about this on Badlands a ton, the 2024 election. That is a contentious thing in this community because even people like myself and, Chris and John talk about this probably more than anybody. The idea that they wanted Trump to be declared the winner of the election, but don't have any confidence in the election system. I have no confidence in the election system. I don't think anybody rational should have any confidence in it. Do you square that by saying that you think we're going to get public election reform? Because that's sort of how I square it. I just have to say, well, man, I hope I think that they obviously know the problems with this stuff. I guess the reason I bring that up is that if there's a subset of Q people that annoy me, and I am one, I am a Q person, it's people that call people doomers when they point out things that they want to happen. Now, I think there are people who doom out and are just like, nothing's getting fixed. This is bullshit. It's fake election. But I think a lot of the people, especially at Badlands, who talk about fake elections, are not doing it to be doomers. They're doing it to say, guys, you understand that we could be watching the implementation of this incredible plan while also understanding that in the future we do need a different election system, right? Like that's probably part of the plan. And I assume and think based on his public comments that Trump knows that as well.
we had Patrick Byrne on Eye of the Storm, and my biggest takeaway from my interview with him was he was like 117% that we are going to get big time disclosure, that it's going to happen
on 2020, right?
On 2020,
yeah,
on 2020.
Diamonds, get the diamonds back.
So my personal thing is that the big heavy lifting's been done, and it's more about exposure. That I say that with the caveat that doesn't mean you stay at home and you don't work hard and you don't, work on a daily basis to grind and fix things. Okay, there's a difference. Part of that, I believe, has to be some sort of exposure around it. That you couldn't flip the Titanic in one swoop. Everybody would have flown off the ship. And it's been a big giant turn, and I believe to get everybody right, left, and center on board with real reforms, you have to have some major disclosure of 2020. That's my opinion.
I agree, and I wanted to surface this. We've talked about this a million times. I figured that was your perspective. I just wanted to surface this, not to pick on this person. I think this is a good thing to respond to. Deirdre says, "BB, if the Patriots are in control, the elections must be okay." Now, I'm a Patriot control guy, like pretty extreme, probably pretty close to what Stormy thinks about Patriot control. We talk about this a lot on the Power Hour. And I'm a guy who calls for election reform. I don't think that mindset is the mindset that patriots want us to have, which is in keeping with what Joe just said there. It can be true that patriots were in control of 2016, which I believe they were in control of 2020, and were in control of 2024. I think that is true. But for the future, we need to, as we are not sovereigns, we are literally, very literally not sovereigns if we are not able to independently verify the results of our elections without listening to Donald Trump verify them for us, or Michael Flynn verify them for us, or Hillary Clinton verify them for us, or Fox, or CNN, or Reuters, or whoever. We need to be able to independently verify and prove that the elections are legitimate. I agree with you that is coming. And one of the reasons, one of the things I've said a couple of years ago on the Power Hour is, if I'm looking from a narrative perspective at when you mentioned the Titanic, like turning the Titanic around, what would be the most effective time to expose the 2020 election fraud? After the fact. I think it would be more effective because on two levels. Number one, Trump has won and, and is in power. So it's not going to be seen by the other side as sour grapes. It's not going to be, it's like, hey, he's president again. He sat on the sidelines for this 4 years, but retroactively, it's going to red pill a lot of Americans about, hey, that 4 years you went through that kind of sucked? It didn't have to be that way. And I think all of that is to cultivate a bipartisan mandate for election reform. So I agree with you that I think it needs to be exposed. I think it will be exposed. And I think that Trump does give a lot of hints that it will be by saying, like, you got to give the diamonds back. A lot of people interpret getting the diamonds back as winning the 2024 election. I don't personally feel that way. I feel like he's talking about, no. There was a theft. You don't, if somebody like burns your house down and then you move into a new house, you didn't get justice for what they did, right? Like, we still need that. And, so I was just interested in your take on that, because that comment is indicative, again, not to pick on you, Deirdre, but I believe that if the Q drops, if patriots are looking at the state of the collective mind, the last thing that they want is for you to be like, patriots got it. Don't worry about it. Our grandkids, who knows, maybe patriots in control still or something. They don't want that. Right.
No, I wouldn't have left corporate America and doing what I do if I just was in the sit back mode. And On our show, we talk every single day, local action, national impact, people jumping into school boards, people doing things. I got a local Florida Badlands group, and they've done all this stuff around, fixing local elections and things of that nature. That's what it's about. I think there's a cue that even says, don't like you use, this is just a tool. I think it says, and that's very important to understand. Just because Q kind of pulled back the curtain to show us, that certain things are going to happen on the big set, the heavy lifting, it doesn't mean to relax and take things. Both things can be true.
Yes.
Some of the big heavy lifting, yes. You and I, we don't have access to nuclear weapons and things of that nature. We don't have access to cut the strings to these world leaders. But you and I have the ability to make sure we get people to go into their PTAs and pound the table to get people to organize, like a Florida Badlands group that we drove and we organized, and we have meetings every 6 weeks. Those things that we can do, the shows that we're doing, all these types of things. There's all this different roles that, one of your questions to me was about roles of Anons. Some people have the gift to make connections. Some people have the gift of music. Some people have a gift to write. Some people have a gift to be a public speaker, to run for office. All these different things, and just being on Eye of the Storm, leading into this show, we had one of our Florida Anons. They're in a bad situation. Their car broke down. Both husband and wife. They need a vehicle desperately. So we said don't rubble rant to us. Hit their go send send go, and they're on their way to helping fix or replace their vehicle. Those are the things everybody can do. Okay, you lift each other up in the moment, and there's nothing to sit back and take for granted. I mean, I worked close to 18-20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I wouldn't be doing any of that. And I'm I'm Mr. Patriots are in control.
right.
I wouldn't be doing any of that if it wasn't important for everybody to understand. We have to not only be involved, but we have to get other people that aren't in the same mindset to start to understand things. And those are the most important messages I get. And I get them on a daily basis on all my platforms. People message me every single day, and they're just like, you've helped me understand through the dark times. You painted the picture that I could understand that there's a bigger hand at play. And whether that's God, the Q team, Trump, those three things, yes, that's what's really Patriots are in full control is God, the Q team, and Trump, in my opinion. And we got to just jump in and do our roles and make sure that we're doing everything from the ground up. I use some military terminology around it. Q team is doing the airstrikes. We're kind of the ground game in between, and they're both important. They're both extremely, extremely important.
Absolutely, man. Very well said. I John, to that point, John often uses the terminology, the devolution sandwich, right? Which is just a great, simple, like, hey, you're right. we have to acknowledge, as much as we'd love to have reformed our country ourselves, there was no way to do that. There was almost no way to do that without that sort of top-down power projection, pincer move helping us, first of all. But even if it wasn't impossible, I do believe to do it bloodlessly was impossible without this, right? And that, I think, is the key. I think the key is, hey, Americans have taken care of things in the past themselves. And probably, if the deep state kept going in a certain direction, we would again. But that's a lot of innocent people that get mixed up in that, and that's the beauty of the plan. I totally agree with how you laid it out. I mean, I don't know if I didn't believe in God, but I was agnostic. I never branded myself an atheist. The Q drops made me believe in God, literally, very literally. And that's why I named the show. I was going to name it something like, Q related, but I named it State of Awakening because it's not the same thing. The Q drops mentioned the Great Awakening, but it absolutely is a different thing. And I can remember being an agnostic, disillusioned liberal in 2017 and being like, in 2016, being like, I like the Trump guy, sure. But I wanted Trump to win in 2016 because I wanted the system to be destroyed. I didn't have a particularly positive mindset. I just was like, burn it down, burn this thing down. Now, I think I was right about that aspect of things. But what the Q drops did, and I'm sure you guys push back on this a lot, for all the arguments of complacency and all of that, it did the opposite with me. It gave me hope and made me go like, okay, there's a path here, right? Like there's a narrow path. I'd written an article years ago called The Narrow Path. That's what it's for. And I like how you ended that with Patriot Control. You can think God, you can think Patriots. I talk about layers a lot. And I do think it takes these layers. And the one more piece of Patriot Control, I would say, is us. This isn't supposed to be corny. You are in control of your mind. If you are in control of your mind, then you are part of Patriot Control. Because most people, whether they voted for Donald Trump in a fake election or Joe Biden in a fake election or didn't vote at all, whether they follow the info war or not, they are not in control of their minds. My own family members, I talk to them, and they could be smart people, totally secondary to whether or not they're in control of their own minds. And the key to that is whether or not you're thinking about these things. I guess one more point I'd make on it before I want to move on to some of the big picture stuff. I guess this transitions us to that. I would just say, to try to build a bridge, I think sometimes where it's like there's people that can go after the Q people by thinking they're being complacent, and that can be annoying to Q people, right? But alternatively, there are people who follow the drops who I think did misinterpret the idea of Patriot Control. And even if there is literal Patriot Control, I promise you that they do not want you to think about things that way. They want you to think about things how Joe is talking about them. So when you see people like Chris or John or whoever, I'm just naming them because they're on Badlands, questioning elections, you can't start hitting people in the info war with accusations that they're dooming. All you're doing is the inverse of what people do to Q people by saying you guys are being complacent. The people dooming about the election system are correct. They have diagnosed that our election system needs to be reformed. And I would say that we need to be able to bridge that, right? We need to be able to say, you can believe in the Q drops and think we're going in the right direction, while also acknowledging that the people who think we need to reform our election systems are not dooming out, and that you're being a fucking retard if you're just saying, like, just chill, guys. Don't, like you said, they want you in the trenches, right? Do you want a soldier in the foxhole, even if you're winning the battle? Do you want a soldier who's like, yeah, I'm not coming with you guys over the hill. Like, we already won. We're already winning. Why would I do that? Like, you want those savages on the battlefield. They're going to go into each trench and the next one after that. Like, you need that. You need the top-down approach and you need the trenches approach.
I believe we purposely, and it's just my opinion, I believe that we purposely showed all the down ticket issues on purpose for all the reasons that you're saying. They still want us engaged. They still want us fighting. And they left us with the Kerry Lake bullshit and the governor in North Carolina bullshit. There's nobody that can convince me. And the only way the math works is that a guy went in and pulled the lever for Trump, and then he pulled the Democrat for North Carolina that has opposite agendas. Yes, some people and I put polls out there to track it myself. Some people do mixed ticket voting. I'm not saying it's impossible, but not in the sense that, Kerry Lake had, forget what the polls say. She had like a Trump side 40, like in my opinion, like a 40% lead on Ruben Gallego. There's no way that many people sat there and looked at Gallego's freaking platform and said, you know what, that makes sense. I like that guy. And also looked at Trump's platform and said, oh, all those things, they're incomplete from the border to, I mean, just everything major. They're on opposite spectrums. I believe that was done on purpose. So people like yourself and me and Abs and John, that we all say, yeah, Trump's in office. Let's celebrate. But no, job's not done, guys. This wasn't the end goal. This is, I think you were going to ask me at some point, what do I think of the timeline? I think my
that was my next thing. Like, where do you think we're at in Q and the psychology? Okay.
I think we're at halftime. I didn't obviously forecast the 4-year pause before it happened.
Yeah.
But there's a Q that talked about, we're like 2 years in and we got 6 to go, that type of talk. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Q made a kind of a loose reference that there's an 8-year plan. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So I personally think that doesn't include the pause. That was Trump's admin 1, and we got Trump admin 2, and that's where I think we're at halftime. We're coming out. We got the new script to go in, and he's got his appointees, and he's doing his executive orders, and we're just coming out hell of fire. And I'm really excited about turning on the news every day and seeing what he's getting done, and we're going to get these appointments done, whether he has to go recess appointment or not. I believe they're going to get through, and the executive orders have been straight fire every day. So I'm really excited. So you get your the big kind of momentum rolling in those first 100 days, and he's coming out swinging.
Damn straight. And you know what I love about the way he is fighting? It maps so cleanly onto the initial inaugural address in 2017 that John has as part of the intro to the Power Hour. It's not just that he's coming in and he's part of this real or fake or somewhere in between administration, and like we're winning, we're owning the deep state, and we're like doing all these cool things with government power. He's stripping away government power. The executive orders are a stripping away. They're addition through subtraction, right? Like the whole it maps very encouragingly onto we're returning power back to you, the people. We're not just governing harder. And that's what I meant in my previous rant. And I know people can get upset about it or whatever. There are Trump voters who just want to be governed really hard by people that they like. That is not the point. And Trump is showing you at the advent of Trump 2.0 that is not the point. You should not be asking for good government. You should be asking for less government. And that's the same thing as good government in my view. And it seems to be sort of underlying a lot of what Trump is doing here.
Our country wasn't founded to be a centralized, heavy, every decision, every trillions and trillions of dollars coming out of a handful of people in Washington, D.C. That's not how our country was founded. Our founders were like part-time workers, and they had their regular jobs, and it wasn't supposed to be like all this type of centralized control. So when he says giving back you the power and those types of things, that hits home to me that we're gonna reset this country, and like you talked about least amount of bloodshed as possible. I call it like the digital revolution that we're going through is what I'm fighting for every single day is really for my children's future, the next 250 years as we go. We'll get some fruits of it for sure, but really we're resetting this country and setting up. And it's probably no coincidence that Trump has announced that he's going to have this like celebration with our like 250th anniversary or something, that he's got a year-long celebration coming. Yeah. So
man, on that note, people, I know we've got Gart Vegas first in March in just a few weeks here. So grab your tickets if you don't have them. I'm trying to get out there. Mrs. Probably shouldn't ask her it
Yeah,
in
timing.
the wee hours of the morning.
Timing,
Yeah,
brother.
yeah. Somebody, guys, put in a word for me. See if she wants me to go to Vegas or not. Anyway, Stormy will probably be there. But on the note of the 250th, we didn't plan it this way. But the Plymouth, Massachusetts. I was born in Plymouth County, raised in Plymouth County. GART is in May. Happens to be the 250th, the year of the 250th anniversary. If you've not been, it's a great excuse to check it out. We'll do some pub crawls, check out the local history and everything. But yeah, man, I agree. And one of the ways I've framed this in terms of
I'm from New England. I don't know if you know that. I'm from Connecticut, born and raised.
I forgot that. You know what? I look down on Connecticut people, I will say. Are you one of those like? Well, let me see where you map. Did you root for the Giants?
No.
The Patriots?
I would go to the Patriot game, but I was kind of a Maverick. My team growing up was the Raiders. I just kind of got off on that, like Al Davis, like fuck you attitude.
I can respect that. I like the Raiders.
And that was pretty much my mantra. Was I went to the Patriot games just because they were there, and they were pretty much terrible back then. But Drew Brees was there at the end when I moved. I moved in '99 to Tampa.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of Bostonians in Tampa. That's like the spot that Bostonians go. The Bostonian snowbirds go. That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
Tampa's a cool place.
Brady was welcome here, by a lot of them.
Yeah, right. That's Boston South, Tampa Bay. Mrs. Bright spent a lot of time in Tampa Bay growing up. So those Canadians, they escaped down there. My experience with Connecticut was all formed one time. I was conned by my mother into going to a Nike running camp at one point. This is where it all started, Joe. This is where it all went wrong for me.
All right.
And I went to this camp, and it was in Vermont. Okay? But here's the twist. I didn't want to go to this fucking running camp because going to a running camp is ridiculous. Nobody would want to do that. I went with my cousin because they wanted me to go with her. So I go. And there's like a few hundred kids at this camp, right? We're up in the mountains in Vermont. And everyone at this camp is from Connecticut. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on in Connecticut that they ship these kids out to the mountains and like they thought it was fun. They thought running around, running 5 miles was fun. And the kicker is I was a sprinter. I was not a distance runner. And my mom sent me to a distance running camp in the mountains. And I just remember at that camp, none of these kids could interact. Like I couldn't interact with any of them. I was trying to like shoot the shit and kind of be a shit-eating wild man and thought just like joking around with them. And it was like I was speaking a different language. They were all so buttoned up, and it froze my impression of Connecticut people from then on.
Wow.
Would you consider Connecticut people like buttoned up and snooty? Because you don't seem like that.
No, I'm not like that. There's heavy pockets of it, and people that probably sent their kids to running camp probably were in those pockets of Snoopville.
Yeah, and I wasn't, so I'm still mad about that, Mom. I've never let her live it down. It was bad. I got stress fractures in both of my feet because it turns out going from sprinting the 100-meter to running 5 miles of hills is not really the same musculature. So,
right.
Yeah. Anyway, Mom. Oh, ridiculous. You threw me all off with that, talking about running camps and everything. I wanted to talk about the theme and thesis section. I always joke it's the second half of the show. Really, it's the final sprint. Wherever you want to go with it. But basically, I guess what's some of the all-time stuff for you from the drops? We went over some of it, but do you have like a one that's your biggest thing? I guess you could go in that direction. And another thing would be, is there something big hinted at in the drops that hasn't come to pass yet that you're really looking forward to, that you think is going to be coming to pass? Whether it's a specific thing or kind of a macro big picture thing.
I'll hit real quick. Some of my favorite ones was what you were saying, and like some of the moments in time. We covered Q140, and that was big for me. I was queued twice, so I was queued twice in a period of like 4 days or something. So obviously that was impactful to me. It was November 11th, and it was funny because my original Twitter that I talked about earlier that I built only to just kind of sit back and just lurk. I quickly put 11/11 in my bio because Q mentioned it as like, we will be unified on 11/11, and story full circle. Q the first time I was queued was on 11/11/19, and then I was queued on 11/15. So yeah, 4 days apart. We talked about the Do It Q proof. That was huge, but the one that really kind of just like, I remember where I was. I remember like getting the message on my phone, and it just shook me to my core where I almost like fell out of my seat in this restaurant I was in. It was it was the day that they announced that McCain passed away.
That was huge.
I knew that was in the drops, and I am like scrolling, and I was like, holy shit. Q gave us not only an exact 30-day heads up, but Q called the shot at the exact like minute marker. It was like mind blowing. It was crazy.
That's one of the most direct, I think. Yeah.
Dog Day. So like, like in the Q drops with the foreknowledge, Q says about John McCain, because like an Anon says, hey, we're a retired vet here. We need people like McCain taken care of and all this type of stuff. Q says every dog will have its day. And then, exactly like 30 days later, McCain checks out. And then the next morning, it was International Dog Day. Yeah. But the timestamps and everything that when Q gave us that information ends up to be the timestamp of his checkout exactly 30 days later.
Yeah.
To the timestamp and the Qs and all this. And Q says, what's the chances of that?
And he did not depart on his own terms, right? And then he had all the stuff with his daughter saying that when they killed my father, and then he caught herself.
But think of that. It's you don't get much higher in U.S. politics than a sitting senator, as we were seeing with these hearings and stuff. That's pretty high up the scale to call your shot and take that individual out, and that's what I believe happened. And when Q was asked like, how do you predict the future and everything, Q said, because we have full control. And that's what I think. It wasn't that Q looked into a looking glass and all this type of thing. I'm not like just blowing off that there isn't some sort of crazy technology. And I firmly believe there's crazy technologies we don't know about. But I believe when Q said we have control meant that, we're going to have this guy check out in 30 days at this particular minute mark. And here's my shot. And it happened on fucking Dog Day.
Yeah.
when Q said every dog has his day, I literally like when I got a pop-up like message that McCain checked out, and like, cause Q had given us kind of like the heads up around McCain. So I was just like the blood ran out of my face. Cause I was just like, what did I just witness? What is this? It was crazy.
Yeah. That's one of the all-timers. The looking glass thing, it's a whole other discussion, but I've been working off and on one of my many features, and it's called Perfect Paradox, but it's kind of about that. Chris and I do the Story Hour show, telling you guys, watch that show. Like, I know that sometimes you think, hey, we're just doing movies. You can learn a lot by analyzing stories. And one of them that really struck me in light of that I related to the Q drops was Tenet, Christopher Nolan's Tenet. It's all about this inverted timeline where you've got a timeline going forward and a timeline going backward in that movie. And you've got operators operating going back. They're operating on the same physical reality layer, but they're inverted in terms of time. And man, it gave me this maybe bullshit, but maybe real epiphany about the drops, about Operation Looking Glass. If you have informational control, you know, Chris kind of talks about this in a different light, but similar when he talks about informational time travel, right? Like if you know, I'm going to butcher it, but he essentially says, if you know, if you have an asymmetric informational advantage about something in the future, you can live now as if that thing is currently true. You know, that's informational time travel, essentially, asymmetry. One of the ways I'd thought about it with the Q drops is I do believe that there's direct Patriot control, you know, operational control. That said, I think the Looking Glass stuff, it's talking about informational control. And one of the themes of that movie is the idea that information is being sent to the operators in the past from themselves in the future. Now, it's not to be magical thinking or whatever. I'm not saying I'm in the future sending stuff to myself through the Q drops. But if you think of Patriots writing the Q drops, they have information asymmetry about the future. To your point, that would mean they have to have some control over the future. Why are they sending it back in time? Why bother? Because they need us. They need this community to move the timeline forward by that. So and they actually use this term. Watch Tenet, and it will blow your mind, guys, after this show. I'm telling you, this week, set aside a couple hours and watch the movie Tenet. They use the term temporal pincer in that movie, where they have those squadrons going in different directions. And the one in the future is sending information to the one in the past, but they can't interact directly. And that's, what do we see with the drops? What do we see with Q Team with the plan? They give us hints. They sent us information. They told us about the future, but not everything, right? They told us what we need to know about the future battles, and we're pushing a timeline forward, but they're not going to directly interact with us. They're not going to directly interface with us, but we're still executing a temporal pincer move. And that's one of the ways I look at the Q drops. It's like this feedback loop. It's not just them telling us about the future. The question has to be asked, why would they do it? Obviously, they did it because they needed to on some level.
There's some tie-ins. I'm sure you've seen them with the movie Back to the Future with the Q operation, and namely Donald Trump, where Bedminster was owned by John DeLorean before Trump. And
I did not know that.
the character Biff in the thing was supposed to be loosely about Donald Trump. So, you know, Mar-a-Lago, where some people think is like, you know, White House South, was owned by John DeLorean before Donald Trump. So that's pretty wild. And there's a lot of stuff in the Q stuff that could be perceived as a tie-in to the movie Back to the Future a bit. What do you got here?
Yeah. Well, I'm just playing B-roll of the Tenet movie. This is an underappreciated one from Christopher.
Yeah, I thought it.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, Joe, rewatch it, thinking about the Q operation. This scene right here, they're talking about inverted time, and then in the future, Robert Pattinson's character is inverted, and they're talking about temporal pincers, the rules about interacting with operators in the past, compartmentalization. They're talking about a mass extinction event, like a scare event, and how the information asymmetry is the only way to stop it. And, you know, who knows with this stuff, but isn't it interesting that Christopher Nolan also did Inception? And isn't it interesting that he also did, which is all about reality layers and relative time? Isn't it interesting that he did the Dark Knight trilogy, which, as I've said a million times, maps extraordinarily closely onto the story of Donald Trump? Isn't it interesting that he did Oppenheimer and got the nuclear narrative back into the public zeitgeist, right? Like, you can look at it as black hat or white hat, but it's some pretty incredible stuff that if you think about it through the Q drops, it'll probably blow your mind.
The Q that says about Obama that when we're done with him, he'll be crying for like Kenyan citizenship, you know, that was impactful to me. I was like, oh shit, man, that's pretty for real. and you touched on it a little bit about, finding God and things like that, but it's the story in the Qs, and I ended up later, getting to know Drew a little bit. But for people that are unaware, there was this Drew Anon in the Qs and things like that, and his like, I think it was a 9-year-old son at the time, Easton, passes away from cancer. Okay, and Drew is like posting about what's up with releasing the cures and that type of thing, and Trump, Q says, Easton's in heaven waiting for you. Okay. Well, the different stuff is going to happen. But just rest assured, he's in heaven waiting for you, and you'll meet up with him sometime soon. So that was like really impactful. And like, I got to know Drew a little bit. Actually, got together with a group, and we even put together some music for him, around a video for him. But that was cool. The choice to know
that is one of the hardest things, right? It's so simple, but that's one of the as somebody who was sort of agnostic and bordered along atheist at times in my life, that would be the reason, right? I mean, it's the age old, like, why do these things happen? But yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of us through the drops, it was being exposed to this deep, deep darkness that actually brought us to light. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it's normal for people to have those dips back into the dark at times and feel that way, especially when stuff like that happens. I was talking about it earlier tonight with Mrs. Brett. I have an uncle right now who's dying essentially, and he's lived a life, but it's still too young, and he's got a 1-year-old granddaughter at his house, and you just sit there and you can't help but sometimes play those games and say, all right, that's where some of the Patriot control can be difficult for some people, where they're going, so you're going to tell me in 2026, according to an informational timeline, that you have cancer cures, but I'm going to watch my uncle, the father of my cousin, my cousins are going to watch their dad die a painful, pretty horrible death because it didn't match your timeline. Even as I talk about it, it starts to work you up, right? So it's tough. You sort of need some faith there, or else it also gives you another example of why they're never going to tell us about this operation. Never, ever, because they can't.
So some of those examples that you just went through also, we're on the same page that we probably let this Biden regime come in, and how many people probably unnecessarily had to die with fentanyl abuses. It's not all things will be clean. This is this is done by a military operation. And so when people come at me when I'm like, that plane or that fire or that hurricane or whatever, where, oh, you're telling me we let 25 people, 50 people die, blah, blah, blah. Think about what we just went through with the Biden regime. How many people passed away from fentanyl? How many people now go back? Q told us cures for cancer. We're going on like 6 years now. Okay. So those are just,
ironically, to that point, if you're talking about a global awakening, if you're talking about a real awakening, you need people to have an animus toward the people who did this to us, right? It's not patriots who did this to us. And I think that's important to point out. Maybe they allowed evil to show its face pretty clearly to us, and that had some damages, but there needs to be a reckoning, right? Like for me personally, I don't know how much you guys talk about him, but he's certainly back in the news. I personally saw those preemptive pardons as narrative deployments meant to resurface certain names. I think of everything in story. Anthony Fauci is one of them. And I was saying back in 2022, 2020 even, man, this guy is being elevated to be a symbol. One of the terms I use in my writing is mind movers or cognitive ciphers, like the characters in the mind war. And for every Donald Trump and Elon Musk, you've got a Hillary Clinton, a Barack Obama, and Anthony Fauci. Now, Anthony Fauci isn't the entirety of the medical big pharma industrial complex, right? But he is a symbol of it. And it feels to me like that stuff is going to come back around. And that COVID narrative, I think if we get full disclosure on that, and I hope and think we will, that's going to hit normies in ways I don't think this audience really gets, because we all know this stuff. But imagine all the people that like excommunicated you, that you knew for not being vaxxed and everything. Imagine how that's going to hit them when they realize that we were right in ways that they couldn't even have fathomed about these people.
Right. Yep. The other cue that hits me is, and I think you talk about it too, is the choice to know will be yours.
Yeah.
And I take that in many different directions in my head. And Q basically told us that we're going to be as transparent as possible, but we won't do it at risk of breaking the United States, and we won't do it at the risk of world war, those types of things that, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, if they just exposed every single detail, there would be people just, we got like what do we got? Like 300 million guns in this country and trillions of ammo. There would be blood loss like you've never seen before if people knew every single thing. People would be rushing in and taking out, CEOs of major company, all the healthcare industry. There would just be just bloodshed everywhere. So in my opinion, we're slow dripping and we're giving enough where you can connect the dots. But at the end of the day, the choice to know will be yours. That's my take.
Yeah.
On it.
And I think I firmly agree with that. And I think that, just like I said with the election and everything, I do think that choice has to be before people. I know that sounds so obvious, but I guess I don't think it can be as simple as this stuff was available if you went looking for it. I think it more has to be like, hey, people, do you want to look at this? And that's why I think we're going to start getting hit over the head with some of this stuff. Like, look at P. Diddy, right? One of the other terms I use is the shark fin template, which is the idea of, the fin, the shark is there, but you see the fin and then the fin goes down below the water, then it comes back up. I think Epstein was the biggest red pill ever administered to humans, and or at least in the modern era. And the name just comes back up, right? And then it goes back down, and then it comes back up, and then P. Diddy, and then we get this, and then we get that. And it feels to me like this germination process that is eventually going to bear fruit.
So one of the other questions you had for me was, what things haven't been uncovered that I'm kind of waiting for, and it goes into that whole timeline narrative, and why do I say I'm at halftime, and what haven't I seen, and what's still to play out. Yeah. The very first set of cues is talking about HRC's arrest. There's mixed thought on that. One of the thoughts is we already saw it but it happened actually before the Q drop operation started, was on 9/11 in 2016, her being shoved into a black vehicle and taken away. Now, it's kind of funny is when the Q drops start, she's in a boot, and also John McCain was in a boot, and all these other people, all these deep state actors, all were in the same medical boot. And McCain's jumped from leg to leg, so it wasn't a medical situation. What Anons theorized was that these people were all under some sort of grand jury, and that they were hiding ankle bracelets. That may or may not have been the case, but I'm just kind of showing you the different thought patterns around. Will this come around, and will HRC be cuffed and stuffed publicly? I'm not sure. Q also says that she was a puppet and the strings have been cut and she's fighting for her life. So we'll see.
Podesta is one of those names that I have looked at. That would be, if you were looking for the ultimate Q proof, not that we really need it at this point, but I feel like a John Podesta situation, that would be massive.
When Q says when 11.3 verifies, basically it's on, and Q references like Podesta around those. So is that what Q means, that when we publicly take him into custody, that's like when it's on? Maybe. I tie these two together, and they just happen to be in the news, okay, is Snowden and Assange, okay.
Right.
The Tulsi hearings, the big question about in the hearings, if you watched them with Tulsi, was all like, how does she protect Snowden, and is he a traitor? Say it. He's a traitor. Say it. You know, that's going to be huge. Okay, when the Q movement first started, people would come to me all the time and say, "Hey, you know, when is this really going to happen?" I would always say, "You'll know it when Assange is on main stage. That's when we know that goal line is right there."
Narrative delivery vehicle, a human narrative delivery vehicle, and it's full circle from the Podesta emails and everything.
Right, exactly. So I think we'll get Snowden, and we'll paint him as a whistleblower, and we'll get him in front of the American public, and then we'll get Assange in front of the American public, and I think those things will hopefully happen maybe this year, but I don't put hardcore timelines around things.
We've all learned not to do that.
There's a meme in the queues. It's Q4095, and the meme is in black and white, and it's Donald Trump, and the meme says, "Stick with me, deplorables. You're gonna like the way this movie ends." Basically, that's obviously huge, and I don't think just getting him reelected is the end of the movie. So I'm waiting for that. One of the last Qs we got, Q was asked, "Is there going to be another Q&A?" And Q replied, "Yes." So I believe I'm waiting for that to happen. Okay, so that
people
Q
in the chat are saying too, Seth Rich, part of the Assange
ties
stuff,
in.
that would be we know this stuff, right? But you've got to think about, normies have been seeded with that conspiracy theory, and the ones, I call this narrative whiplash. It was the first kind of term I made up in the info war. The most powerful form of narrative whiplash is when somebody is hit with a boomerang of the opposite of what they were seeded with. So they were seeded with the idea that the Seth Rich conspiracy was a conspiracy. It was a theory. It was crackpots. The Seth Rich conspiracy is ground zero to lead people into everything else, right? It's not about Seth Rich. It's about the implications of when that's disclosed, that everything else those people were saying that followed on from Seth Rich was true, right? That's how this stuff works. That's how quickly an awakening cascade can kick off. It's just there could be a Seth Rich domino, and that goes boom, Seth Rich, Clinton crime family, Pizzagate, all the way down the line, Epstein Island, all the way to the 2020 election and beyond, right? That can be how quickly it starts.
Yep. Cash is on record that he'll show the public that stuff, and that was shown in those hearings. If you want to pull up the slides again, there was two in there that we didn't touch on that answer some of these things about time, kind of what's hitting today and how it goes back to the drops there. Yeah, the next one down, the other way, the green ones, the last two on the bottom of the slides. Yep, so let's stop there. I did this Q proof last Sunday, okay, and so I'm on 3 days a week on Eye of the Storm, Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. I do what's called Q proofs on Sunday. But when I do the Q proofs, I try to think in my head, not only do I want to show people what happened in the past, but I want to tie it to something that I think is going to happen soon. Okay. And this happened. All right. So this original Q 604 is dated January 24th, 2018. And Q gave us the pen that Donald Trump would sign his executive orders with, as whenever Q did this, Q did it several times, kind of follow the pen, and also the black book that Trump kind of proudly shows. They're in the Q drops, but they're always little signals that an executive order was going to come shortly. So Q gave this on the 24th of 2018, and then over on the right here, 6 days later, we get this executive order by Donald Trump. So that was kind of the Q proof. But the reason why I showed this particular Q proof is what it's about. So President Donald Trump is protects America through lawful detentions of terrorists. Okay. And what I said last Sunday was, I'm kind of feeling like we're going to get some Gitmo news. You know, it started with like the Army Navy game. There were some comms in that. And then we saw Pete get nominated, and Pete served at Gitmo as part of it. So there was those tie-ins. And then, you know, Follow the Pen, Catherine, she's stationed at Gitmo, and she's, by the way, every post that she puts on Twitter has all kinds of Q comms labeled into it from what she's saying. But I said on the previous Sunday show, and look at the date, it's January 30th, 2018. Okay. So let's go to the next slide down. Yep. And you can kick it over. So at the same time as I was saying, watch for some news around that, I was hinting towards Q740, which is a coming Delta 2, February 11th. But what it's about is an anon-asked Q, basically, how full is Gitmo going to be? And Q said max capacity, and we're also another prison is being prepped. On that day, January 31st or January 30th of this year, our new press secretary had this to say, and I don't know if you have the video to play.
I do indeed.
Hey, that's Stormy Pete's guy joke.
Senate to continue quickly confirming the remainder of President Trump's well-qualified nominees in the days ahead. Earlier this week in the East Room, the president proudly signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, surrounded by Laken's loving parents and sister. This common sense bipartisan law mandates the federal detention of illegal aliens who are accused of theft, burglary, assaulting a law enforcement officer, and any crime that causes death or serious bodily injury, like the animal who murdered Laken Riley in cold blood. This was the first piece of legislation President Trump proudly signed as the 47th president of the United States.
I just want to pause this for 1 second to say it is the official position of we here at The Narrative that calling illegal alien criminals animals is super based and awesome.
And it will guarantee that Laken did not die in vain. As Laken's mother, Allison, tearfully said during the signing event, President Trump said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken, and he hasn't. He's a man of his word, and we trust that he will fight for the American people. Those are the words of Laken's mother, and we will never forget them. So to help lock up even more criminal illegal aliens, President Trump signed a memorandum this week to detain them at Guantanamo Bay. This action will expand the Migrant Operations Center at Naval Station Guantanamo Bay to full capacity to provide critical extra detention space for high priority criminal illegals. Our brave ICE agents continue to arrest more and more of these types of individuals every day in communities across our country.
See how that's like a multi-level Q proof?
Oh yeah. So and then what other prison could we possibly be talking about?
Trump Jr. makes the joke. I believe it's a joke. I don't think Alcatraz is going to be repositioned, but we'll have to see. But it was crazy that Q gave us a heads up of the executive order. The executive order happens to be talking about detaining of terrorists and such, and then Q gives us this max capacity Q drop. And she ties everything around with the Delta. She's up there either January 30th or 31st, whichever. Bangs right off of what I was pointing to 10 days ago on the show. And it all played out in real time right there. Hitting all the deltas, hitting all the proofs, hitting the language of, she should have said max capacity just to get me more excited, but she said full capacity. But it's right there. That was freaking banger.
Damn good one.
And when you're asking me like where we are and what the timeline and what's important and am I seeing things hot that are everything on Eye of the Storm the past year we pulled out of the 2018 drops, and that's another one right there in front of you is both of them that Q proof is the 2018 Q proof. That executive order was signed in 2018, Q gave us this max capacity Gitmo thing, and she hits all of it, and those are all 2018 drops. So that's kind of where my head's at. And there's one Q that says 2018 will be glorious, and that year wasn't so glorious in real time. I really think that Q was saying future-proof past, when all the things I gave you as breadcrumbs in 2018 come to fruition. That's going to be glorious, and that's what's happening right there. I mean, I was excited as hell to hear her say that, and Trump was truthing like crazy about Gitmo, and I posted it today. Gitmo, Gitmo, Gitmo. Like I wake up in the morning and I smell Gitmo.
Yeah, man, and we've talked about at the beginning of the show just the advent of the golden age here. It's almost surreal to people in this community that it's just this blitz of stuff that we always believed was possible, but to see it being done, it retroactively even more so codifies the idea of long-term planning. It had to be this way. And I think for normies, probably especially for normies, one of the things I've been talking about a lot is don't miss. Chris has been talking about this as well. One of the major stories, I think, at the beginning of Trump 2.0 is just almost the de facto disclosure of, we could have done this shit. We, the American people, we, the American government, we could have done all of this at any point in time, right? It's not just cool that Trump shut down the border in 24 hours. It's showing normies that, yes, it actually was that cartoonishly easy. All you had to do was just do it. All of these things are just that fucking easy if you have the right leadership and if you're not being run by a criminal cabal. And I think that also goes the other way. One of my big stories to watch in 2025, and I think we're getting it. I've been talking about this for quite a while. I think part of what's going on with Trump's deployments toward Canada and Mexico, etc., is we've been told the awakening will spread worldwide, right? Well, I think that a lot of Western countries that are not the US are behind us in the awakening. And I mean on a psychological level. I know many Canadians. I know there are Canadians who are based. I know you're right, but there are Europeans who are based. There are not as many of them who are based per capita as Americans, not even close. And even the ones who don't like Justin Trudeau, many of them, they're complacent. They're like, we don't need like a Canadian MAGA movement or anything like that. I think part of what's going to go on here is that whether it's tariffs or whatever else, while the US is accelerating at this warp speed golden age timeline, these other Western nations are not going to be doing that, in my opinion. And that is going to be, I do think the awakening spreads worldwide, but I think that is meant to show Germans, Canadians, English, French, look at them. We could do that too. Why aren't we? Right? I think Trump and patriots in the US are trying to get those Europeans and sort of like domesticated, as G-Money would say. You need to sack up. You need to become more like America First patriots. And Trump is very public about saying, like, you should be Canada first. You should be Germany first. You should be France first. Like, it's sovereignty. As Xi Jinping would call it, multipolarity. That's what we're going into. So that's kind of one of my big things to watch this year.
What's your take on the tariffs?
Well, we'll see if they happen, right? Because a lot of times we get rug pulled. But I think that's part of what I mean. One of the things that one of the movie scenes I talk about a lot is from Watchmen, when Rorschach is in prison and he says, "You all don't seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me." Another scene I talk about quite a bit is from Game of Thrones. You know what? I'm just gonna play it because I think I played it on Story Hour, and and it's worth.
I thought for
playing.
sure you were gonna have like a Joker Batman thing in there. That's kind of on the same lines where he purposely gets himself locked up.
Well, I think that's part of it, but this is what I think is going on in a nutshell with Donald Trump and the United States and these tariffs with Europe, with Canada, with Mexico. Think of, ironically, think of Cersei Lannister here as Donald Trump, and think of Littlefinger in this scene as the Western globalist hegemon, the old powers. And just pay attention to what she's saying in this interaction. Oh, is it muted? Hold on.
Yeah.
It would help if I didn't mute it. I'm very professional at this.
The Mockingbird. You created your own sigil, didn't you?
Yes.
Mockingbird.
Appropriate for a self-made man with so many songs to sing.
I'm glad you like it. Some people are fortunate enough to be born into the right family. Others have to find their own way.
I heard a song once about a boy of modest means. Found his way into the home of a very prominent family. He loved the eldest daughter. Sadly, she had eyes for another.
When boys and girls live in the same home, awkward situations can arise. Sometimes I've heard even brothers and sisters develop certain affections. And when those affections become common knowledge, well, that is an awkward situation. Indeed, especially in a prominent family. Prominent families often forget a simple truth. I've found.
And which truth is that?
Knowledge is power.
Seize him. Cut his throat. Stop. Wait. I've changed my mind. Let him go. Step back 3 paces. Turn around. Close your eyes. Power is power.
Sorry to subject some people to that again, but I think it's one of the great scenes because it really is that simple sometimes. I think what Trump is doing with the tariffs, besides the income tax disclosure, right, which is that we don't actually need to be taxed in any way, not only is it unconstitutional, it's not useful, it's not doing anything for us. But I think this is a power is power move. I think that this is going to be disclosure to American people, and more importantly, to Canadians, to Mexicans, to Brits, to French, to Germans. We don't need you. Literally at all. Not full stop. Full stop. We do not need Canada at all. Yes, we buy some energy from them. We don't need to buy that energy. We're selling energy to Europe. We can just not fucking do that. We can just keep it. We don't need Chinese-made products. We don't need Ford F-150s to be built in Mexico. You need them to be built in Mexico. You need the Americans to buy your energy. You need American products. You need American protection. You need us. We don't need you. And I really think that that's what Donald Trump is doing here, is he's calling, and I said this on Twitter yesterday, Trump just checked or he called in poker, right? And the opposition is bluffing. You can't bluff on the back of a call. That's not how the game works. Trump just told you, I'm here's my cards. This is what I'm doing. And Trudeau and Sheinbaum are bluffing. And I think that he's going to squeeze these economies, because here's the more positive way to frame this toward Canadians in our audience, toward Brits, etc. You don't need us either. Or here's another way of saying it. You shouldn't need us, right? If you need the US economy to bail you out, it's for one reason. Your governments sold you out to globalists. And that's why you are a vassal state of American workers. We own you. And Trump is showing the Canadian people that we own them. And I think the point is to get them pissed off. And first off, they're going to be pissed at us. They're going to be pissed at Donald Trump. The Canadian dollar is crashing, and that's compared to a US dollar that's not built on a whole lot, right? I think a lot of this is to wake them up and to get them to start looking at their own governments so that they don't just follow the US everywhere. Like, start making your own way, start acting like sovereigns, stop being little globalist cuck bitches is to put it diplomatically.
Yeah, and I think some of that messaging was when he was saying, well, you could be our 51st state, and you could be our governor if you want.
He's trying to rile them up.
I don't know if it was Musk or somebody posted about just showing the imports exports gaps there. So Donald Trump holds all the cards, and
exactly.
I personally I believe that stuff is just a leverage move, and it's a show up. We'll see how it plays out. What's your
it's the same thing though, right? Even if it's a leverage move and the tariffs don't get implemented, it shows the same thing, right? It shows that Trump is the one with the actual power, and that's being disclosed to those people.
What's your take? Is this like for real that he's interested in Greenland?
Man, Greenland is really interesting from a trade corridors perspective. And I haven't done deep dives on this, but the Greenland deployment, I think first of all, he's trying to maybe get people to dig into the relationship between Greenland and Denmark. And why is it that this satellite European, pretty much irrelevant country these days holds this massive geopolitical military strategic landmass? That's a little bit silly, right? But I think deeper, Matthew Ehret, the Canadian, speaking of, at Badlands, he's done a lot of writing on our Substack. I would encourage people to go search for him on the Badlands Substack. There was, a couple hundred years ago, in the 1800s, before the Civil War, I believe, there was meant to be massive joint Arctic projects between the United States and Russia, the Tsars. And this was supposed to be Arctic railways, trade, sea routes, all this kind of stuff, right? And energy projects.
Yeah.
So, and Trump has been talking about Arctic energy projects, and you know who's talking about energy projects a lot in the Arctic is Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. I think part of what's going on in Greenland is they're giving us these hints. The Arctic is going to be a huge thing in the as we're pushing forward into this new golden age, probably in ways I can't even think of right now. But on a baseline level, I think we're going to get trade routes, energy, perhaps disclosures of just how valuable the Arctic is and what's going on up there. It's not just scientists running around with penguins, right? Like, that's a bunch of gay bullshit. So that's a strategic place, and it's been closed off to us by the globalist, by the globalists for a reason.
I think only like 50,000 people total live there.
Yeah,
it's
crazy.
It's crazy.
And they agree. Politico was shocked to find they thought all these Greenlanders were going to be like mad at the Orange Man, and most of them are open to. They're like, yeah, we were surprised to find that most Greenlanders are open to Trump's offer because they're like, yeah, we become American. That sounds awesome.
But I've heard a few of those interviews, and the people are getting it is they're sitting on probably, crazy wealth with minerals and oil and different things. So, come here and help us enrich this and keep it in our country. And, they'll be like running around in $1 million cars, just like Saudi Arabia real quick.
Yeah, and hey, if you believe any of the stuff G Money and Pip talk about with Bitcoin mining and energy production in the future, you know what's really, really, really good for data centers is cold climates. So besides oil and stuff like this, one of the reasons Russia is so great with data mining is the cold climates, because to run those rigs, it generates an exorbitant amount of heat. So anyway, it should be interesting. Man,
their girls look good in those fur jackets too. That's a bonus.
You talking about snow bunnies? Can't talk about snow bunnies on the show, man. Man, I want to talk. Maybe let's end before we get to the rants with a brief thing on. I've been obsessed with this topic for a long time. It represents a timeline convergence in my mind, in my life as a Northeast liberal who became a Trumper. But I think it's significant to this movement. I'll just lay out my theory is that the analogs to Donald Trump and John F. Kennedy are so much more than a lot of MAGA believe. I think Q people believe the same thing. And I think that a lot of the storylines that we've seen in the zeitgeist, I've been writing about back channels, Cuban Missile Crisis, RFK fucking Jr. is like, excuse my language, is in the mainstream narrative right now. JFK files, CIA. I think that we're seeing a timeline convergence here, sort of like a rerun of the Kennedy era, but with the way it should have gone. That's kind of how I've been seeing things, but I know you had some thoughts on Trump and JFK and those analogs through the Q lens.
Yeah, on a high level, the imprint all the way through the Q drops is heavy JFK influence. The where we go one, we go all is tied. Just the whole movie White Squall is about the back channels, and it's got the Kennedy operation behind it. The Cuban Missile Crisis, it's all in there. But I give you one particular cue, and you pulled it up there, 703. Doesn't get much bigger than this. Rest in peace, Mr. President JFK. Through your wisdom and strength, since your tragic death, patriots have planned and installed by the grace of God and activated the beam of light. We will forever remember your sacrifice. May you look down from above and continue to guide us as we ring the bell of freedom and destroy those who wish to sacrifice our children, our way of life, our world, we the people. And Q says that prayer is said every single day in the Oval Office, and they're obviously dedicating that prayer to JFK. And it says on the bottom here, JFK secret societies, where we go one, we go all. Just like in the video that we showed, how that video ended with that phrase. That is seated, but like I was telling Burning before the show, was you don't get much more. You got to just kind of like in your mind. I'm thinking of it in that Oval Office that Donald Trump and his team say this prayer, and that is dedicated to JFK. That is as big of a moment in the drops as there is. That shows I've always looked at the drops as finishing some of the JFK mission. That's how they read to me. That's how they read to me is that and Anons have made I started it, I'm gonna finish it with JFK and Donald Trump, so Anons have picked up on that, and I love those memes. We show them on Eye of the Storm, but that's when I read through them. That was kind of like my feel about him, and that's I know like your take goes even deeper with kind of following the footprints of his executive orders and things like that, and that's where G Money's heads at too as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you thematically. I think that now did the plan start with JFK? I don't know. I've actually started to go further back and done a lot of research recently into Eisenhower. I think Eisenhower was a great American patriot. I think that he knew what was going on. He coined the term military-industrial complex. I on a recent show, or maybe it was in an article, I was talking about a letter he sent and published to Congress in 1958, I want to say, talking about the compartmentalization of the U.S. military and how it was a threat to the sovereignty of the American president, which by extension made it a threat to the sovereignty of the American people. He was talking about the creation of the administrative state. John F. Kennedy followed him into office, and I think that Eisenhower had something to do with that. And, it wasn't successful at that time. So the way I look at all of this is I think that Eisenhower and Kennedy were the first try of an alliance of American patriots who attempted to root out the deep state because they discovered it and they failed. They found it, they maybe cataloged it, they went to war with it. They failed in a way. In another way, it's interesting, Beam of Light, what you just read, kind of makes me think about it differently now. It almost makes me think, I've said many times, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, maybe it was a demoralization event, but it also was the most botched narrative of all time, and I don't say that lightly. Every person in the world believes that the official narrative of the JFK assassination is a lie. Every single person in the world believes that. Like, that's not a joke, right? Your parents, your boomer grandma, like whoever it is, not boomer, your greatest generation, like grandparents, believe that he was killed by the CIA. The Russians believe he was killed by the CIA. The Canadians believe he was killed by the CIA. We all fucking know what happened. Everyone knows what happened. So was the deep state really, did they win? I think they won in that pocket of time, but I see this Q stuff as the sort of resurfacing of a Patriot plan that was forced underground. When you look back at how far back this stuff goes, you can look into secret societies go both ways. People maybe can dig into Plus Ultra. Speaking of Q Plus, that might blow your mind to start digging into Plus Ultra. Some people believe that the Trumps and John Trump were part of Plus Ultra. People believe that John F. Kennedy was part of Plus Ultra, which is rumored to be a secret society going the other way. So, I think that it's actually very encouraging to me. I think this stuff does converge. And just to show people, you do this too. And I know it's not, people can think sometimes it's to brag. Sure, maybe it's a little bit of that. But it's also just to tell people that you can see this stuff coming. 2 years ago, I wrote Temporal Trump Card and said that we're looking at a convergence of narratives. And at the advent of Trump 2.0, we were going to get a resurfacing of the JFK files narrative. And that was for the purposes of unifying timelines. I think that that's what it's about. I think it's probably heading to this. And recently, I was talking about back channels.
Yep.
So this is another one, right? You want to look for back channels. Well, what was going on with John F. Kennedy? Back channels to Nikita Khrushchev, Cuban Missile Crisis, and now we've got back channels. They're literally using the term back channels between Trump and Putin. So yeah, I think we're essentially seeing a rerun, but it's the choose your own adventure where we went in the positive direction instead of the dark timeline.
Absolutely. Did you see, I think it was, were you on there with Chris Paul where I gave the notes about the White Squall movie and all the connections in there?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of stuff you're saying was woven throughout the movie White Squall, and I gave you guys my notes for when you guys were going to run through that movie. So that was cool.
Yeah, man. All right. Anything else you wanted to hit in terms of I'm going to grab the boosted rants and another short episode of the narrative. Anything else anything you're particularly looking forward to in terms of storyline of what we're getting pretty soon?
At some point, and we talk, and it leads right off of what you were just talking about. It's not that I'm looking forward to it, but I could see kind of like the pieces moving. That there probably will be a scare necessary event. And there's missiles in the queues. There's DEFCONs in the queues, and it could be kind of like just like a mirror off of what you're saying there with the Cuban Missile Crisis and things like that. And the Q goes on to say, only real change will happen at the precipice. Okay. Yep. I have always read that Q as the threat of basically some sort of like nuclear situation as the precipice.
Totally agree. It's the only thing. There are other precipices. I understand, like there are economic things. I've often called it a crisis cascade. I think there'll be a lot of stuff going on, but I totally agree. what is the story that could get everyone to stop and pay attention to the narrative at the same time? That's the only one, in my opinion.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah. So, and when and keep in mind, you guys might have mapped this on Eye of the Storm. Last year, we saw they have told us that there are going to be Russian repositioning exercises all over the world with nuclear submarines. Russia has already told us all this. But when they do it, you're going to see the narrative kick off. And as we said earlier tonight, the choice to know is yours. You were told these are repositioning exercises. If you start to think a nuke's going to be in the air, you have self-selected yourself right out of the info war and you're back in Normieville. So like, if you find yourself freaking out about nukes in the air, you took a wrong turn somewhere.
Exactly.
All right, man.
Cool.
I much appreciate you joining the show. If you need to bounce, you can. Otherwise, I'll run through rants. You're welcome to stay if you want to.
Yeah, no, my honor. I appreciate being on, and we'll have you on Eye of the Storm at some point. And yeah, I'll stick around. Hopefully I'll see you at Guard as well.
I know. We have to lobby Mrs. Bright. She said unprovoked recently that she thinks I should go. So we'll see. All right, the narrative. I don't know if I read these last week, but I don't think
I don't think getting you out of the house for a few days is something that should be too difficult.
That's fair. Vicky Dirk said, thanks for the narrative and the Substack. I think I read these last week, actually. Pig 4801, I did not get this one. This was $50 from last week. I freaking love this combo of BB and Zach. More, please. Can you dump John on Wednesdays and add Zach, or have Zach permanent on the show? No censoring, no hurrying to finish, no interrupting. Great show. We certainly don't hurry on this show. I'm glad some of these people like when we ramble and, as Trump would say, the weave.
The weave.
Yeah, and for the accounts that were created tonight to go into the chat and talk about how mean I was to Zach, I've said it before, I'll say it again. We know that we know what you're doing with these accounts. We notice what you're doing. Sometimes you forget to log out of them. This show will have 99% upvotes, but the top voted comments are going to be the usual guys from other networks. So just, we love it that you guys are watching us. JCQ17, 1111. I always read, sometimes you cannot tell people the truth, you must show them as the exposure of evil. Now it's been inverted. It's exposing how good things can be to those of us who never thought evil could be defeated. The Great Awakening. Good way to think of it. Micro Toolmaker sent a $117 boost. Hey, BB, Rumble doesn't like taking my rants tonight, so here you go. Love your show, and where we go one, we go all. Thank you so much for doing that. Very much appreciated. I don't know what was going on with Rumble. I know sometimes people have problems with that. Hey, when you leave a boost, more of it does get to us. So if that counts for you guys, that helps us. Steph Asia, $25. Hey, BB and Joe, great weaving together of Q posts, Joe's Q proofs, conspiracy facts, and the many narratives BB's been following. Such an enjoyable show. Many thanks. Thank you, Steph. Much appreciated. If you want to leave a boost on replay, I will get those next week. Rants, Tom Terrific, $25. I'm expecting this coming week to be just as good as the last two for the cause. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, man, aren't we starting to believe what Trump said about getting tired of winning? Like, we're just at the beginning stages of that. Ed Benson, BB, I'm turning the show off and will never watch again because of your trashing of Zach Payne. At the beginning, it was completely uncalled for. You could have said nothing. Bye. Okay, Ed Benson, go fuck yourself.
He's probably kidding.
Yeah, if he's kidding, go fuck yourself in a friendly way. If you're not, go fuck yourself in an unfriendly way. Obviously, I was joking. If you don't understand that, then you're retarded. Angie K, thing that worked best in hiccups with my boys was massaging their backs. Start low or work up, just massaging as you would yourself. It helps them get the gas up faster. I've been getting a little better at it. Man, it is so cute when I have him on my chest and he like pushes up and looks at you.
Yep.
Nell P, $20. BB, thank you. I really loved Zach last week. You both played so well together. One of my favorite episodes so far. Thank you. Astro Emmy, 17. In the early 2000s, Russia tried to help us in Afghanistan, and our military attaché in another country refused to listen to them. Stupid of us. My husband witnessed this himself. I told people recently, the guy I was training with, in like 15 years ago was a Russian Spetsnaz who fought in Afghanistan in the 90s and was Russia pilling me. Kitty Kubiak, this came out of Trump's first trip to India, but always reminds me of the Saudi sword dance.
Yep.
Which one is this? This is the... Oh, it's not. Oh, that video is not working for me. Oh. Why? Oh, I copied the link wrong.
You got swords on your wall for your own personal sword dance.
I do. I don't know why this clip isn't working for me, but anyway, I'm sure it was a good one. Yeah, always have swords. You should always have swords. AH13, when Trump puts out videos like the submission video, how can normies deny all the euphemisms?
Here we go.
Yeah. Normies just absorb information. They don't actively look for information. And sometimes it's that simple. Faux Milk, $50. Fantastic show. Two of my favorite guys. Thank you for all your hard work. Much
Thanks, Mom.
appreciated. James Klain, $10. Do you think USAID will go away, or will it still do some humanitarian work? I think they were doing some work they did was really good, providing medical care to the poor. Love your analysis. My view on that is that you have been hoodwinked. Any good work these organizations do is a cover for the bad work that they are doing. So charity is good, but charities are usually not. I think most of the ones we've been taught to trust, and these agencies are part of the administrative state and are not doing good for the world. But that's just me. Wedge Gravy, Trump going to tell all March 4th with the eyes of the world on him. Do you think March 4th represents what we might call reconstitution?
We'll see. I'm not sure, but it makes the most sense.
Yeah. Tom Terrific, $25. This has been the best program I've ever seen. That's Tom. That's the Tom Brady.
The GOAT.
So he is absolutely the GOAT. Man, talk about psyops. There were people that deluded themselves for years about our Lord and Savior Tom Brady. And you see the fake NFL is trying to give Mahomes another one. I saw a crazy stat, speaking of that. Patrick Mahomes' first regular season loss was Tom Brady.
Yep. Right.
His first playoff loss was Tom Brady, and his first Super Bowl loss was Tom Brady. It's like amazing. Q Patriot 27. Q mentions that this will be the end of the Democratic Party. Do you think that we return back to a republic before the 1951 limitation of a president to serve more than 2 terms? I don't care about the 2 terms thing. I think presidents should serve as long as people want them to serve. I just want to get back to the will of the American people. If the will of the American people is like a forever Trump, then that's the will of the American people. But
the other tie-in is an anon asked Q, is there a plan after Trump? And Q replied yes. So whatever the handoff is after Trump was part of the plan.
Do you think it's JD Vance? Because there are differing opinions on that.
I would say no, but we'll just have to see what happens.
Yep. Tattooed Teacher, $17. Great show tonight. 17. Thank you, Tattooed Teacher. Angel Christine Patriot, $10. Excellent show tonight. One of the best. Thank you, BB Joe and Badlanders chat. You're all amazing patriots. That is it. Thank you guys for your support. Joe, where can the good people find you besides Eye of the Storm? You got a little Substack scrounging around out there, don't you?
Yep. Stormy Patriot Joe on my Substack is the best way to support me, as I recently jumped out of a long-term corporate America gig, and the 3 shows that we do on Eye of the Storm and my Substack are how I pay my bills. So if the Substack's like $7 a month. It's cheaper if you prepay it, but if you want to invest in me being able to stay on the air and do what I do, that's the best way to do it. And it's fun. I cut up the shows and I put them in there. Plus I do takes in between the shows and I put them in there. I also, write different things, or if I get something quick in my head, I'll put it in there. and I'll have some fun with it from time to time too. Tell some things about my personal life and things that I got going on. If I'm going for bike rides or stuff with my dog at the dog park, I'll put them in there. So give it a follow. Give it a try. Give it a try.
StormyPatriotJoe.substack.com. I've said before, guys, but Substack is one of the best. A lot of your dollar makes it to whoever you support there. We've got a Badlands Substack. I've got my own, burningbright.substack.com. Those are great ways to support us. It's easy to cancel if you want to cancel. But yeah, we really appreciate you guys. We say it before. I mean, we've got our thank you to our sponsor tonight, Amada Life. Even our sponsors, most of them are Badlanders. And then besides our sponsors, we are very literally funded by you guys. So we know that not everybody can do it, but when you guys send Rumble Rants over, boosts, or when you support us on our individual Substacks, that's the stuff. The Substacks, for anybody who wonders, like, why do that over Rumble Ranting, Joe can attest to the anxiety that you can get in the info war, because this stuff is tough to do full time. John's provided a great opportunity for a lot of us, but whether it's Badlands or individual people, those are subscriptions that we can see and sort of plan on, instead of not knowing what's going to happen next month and the month after. So if you're able to, everyone appreciates it. I think most people here have their own Substack, and it's a great way to help us. Appreciate you joining the show, Joe. We will do it again. I cannot believe I have not been on Eye of the Storm. What in the heck? What have you guys
we were going to do it around some sort of hockey theme with the whole when the Bruins are in the playoffs, but I think something happened and that got sideways. But yeah, we'll get that aligned shortly after Gart, man.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, much appreciated. Thank you guys for watching. I will outro with the intro. This is a long one, but a great one. A long one, but a great one. I am on baby duty after the show, so I will go grab that little brat. Remember, people, the war is a story. The story is a war. Even the Q drops. Act accordingly. Peace out.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through. It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened. So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You will bring me. John, I do not know what strength is in my blood, but I swear to you I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.